Chapter 869. In the face of Thea's all-out attack, Shea chose the most conservative defense. Unfortunately, there was still a big gap in strength. The landscape of this uninhabited planet was destroyed. Thea did not hold back at all. A large amount of death aura was everywhere, and the entire battlefield was like a ghost town. With a bang, Shea fell heavily to the ground. Heavily injured, he struggled a few times but could not stand up. Thea stepped on his neck. "You're so difficult to deal with. You wasted 20 minutes of my time. Tell me, what's your plan? If you tell me well, I'll spare your life." Shea's mouth was full of blood. He coughed hard twice. "I don't need your pity. Rebuilding Krypton has been my long-cherished wish. Now that this wish is about to come true, I have no regrets." After saying that, he closed his eyes and looked like he was waiting for death. "You said you're facing me for the third time? I don't see how much of a threat you are. So that means you were killed by me the first 2 times? Actually, you don't know what's going to happen next, right? Because you were killed by me, you went back to that loophole." Thea analyzed. "I didn't stop the first 2 times and killed you. Actually, that was a relief. You have some special ability that allows you to go back to that time point after death. When you come here for the 4th time, you'll be more familiar with my moves, right? That's why you want to die, isn't it?" She smiled and restrained her murderous aura. "The more the enemy wants to do something, the more we can't let him do it." Seeing that she couldn't get anything out of him, she summoned a huge stone pillar and tied Shea up tightly with 8 iron chains. He couldn't escape in a short time, so she turned around and returned to Earth. From the time they left the watchtower until now, only an hour had passed. However, Thea did not see the few figures she expected. Not to mention Diana, Superman, and even Batman were nowhere to be found. "Thea, you're finally back." She pushed open the door of the surveillance room and saw Nightwing sitting in Batman's usual seat and greeting her. "Finally? Why do you use this word? Where's Bruce?" "Finally, my ass." Nightwing didn't know how to explain. He scratched his head. "I don't know much about magic, but it's been a week since Superman and the others returned." "I'm sure of that." Thea's first thought was that he was spouting nonsense. Nightwing was talking in his sleep. They hadn't even fought for more than 20 minutes. How could it have been a week? However, after carefully sensing Nightwing, he confirmed that it was indeed Nightwing. However, when she looked at Earth from the corner of her eye, she noticed an anomaly. The flow of time on Earth was wrong. It wasn't magic, but it felt a bit like willpower. The effect was very powerful. The time on the entire Earth was sped up by more than 100 times. In fact, the watchtower was also affected. It was just that she had forced her way in and broke through the enchantment here. She really didn't know what to call it. "Where are the others? I can't stay here for long. The enemy should have sensed me." Nightwing felt as if his brain had suddenly gone blank. Then, a lot of things were forced into his mind. This was the discomfort caused by the different flow of time. He forced himself to endure. The new world. The remaining heroes are in the new world. Hearing the word remaining, Thea's heart was hazy. She was closely connected to the new world, so she was directly transported there. The expected scene of wounded people all over the ground and countless urns of ashes didn't appear. Along the way, many people had strange expressions. There was anticipation and a little fear. This made Thea very surprised. She found Batman in the magic school. This guy always wore that outfit regardless of day or night. When she pushed the door open, there was an argument inside. Several magic experts from Earth were present. Thea only nodded slightly to Old Ma. She hurriedly asked Batman, "Where's Diana? My mother? What's the situation on Earth now?" Batman still had a poker face. "The president is still in the White House. There's no danger at the moment. As for Earth, I can only say that the situation is complicated. As for Diana, we don't know where she is either." Thea only felt a sense of absurdity in her heart. They didn't know whether Diana was alive or dead, and her mother was still on Earth. But this group of people was arguing pointlessly. She felt very uncomfortable. Her slender hands clenched tightly. Her eyes became colder and colder. An invisible murderous aura began to spread. Thea. Malcolm hurriedly called out to her when he saw that she was not in a good state. The young lady also knew that she was on the eve of a breakthrough. At this moment, it was very easy to be affected by death. She focused her mind and took 2 deep breaths to suppress her restlessness. Who is the enemy? There has to be an enemy, right? It's a god who came from the sky. Who? His believers call him Rao. Thea was puzzled. She almost thought that she had misheard. Batman repeated it again. She still couldn't believe it. It can't be. Rao is just an ordinary person. She couldn't tell Batman that she had seen Rao in Haruba's memory. In the eyes of the Kryptonians, Rao was the sage of their race. He was similar to the sages on Earth, but he was definitely not a god. Did you hear it wrong? This guy has been dead for 250,000 years. Thea felt that the information from Batman didn't match what she knew at all. I don't know if that guy is a god or not, but Superman listens to him, and a female Kryptonian is also helping him. Constantine seemed to be talking to himself. The remaining few people spoke one after another, piecing together the whole story. According to their accounts and Batman's calculations, when they were fighting against Haya, a huge alien spaceship came to Earth. A holy god descended from the sky, followed by countless believers. At that time, Superman returned to Earth. No one knew what Rao said to him, but Superman quickly called on everyone to believe in this god, and said that Rao would bring eternal peace and tranquility to Earth. Later, Supergirl Kara joined in. Only Fura coughed up blood and escaped to the new world. She had yet to wake up. Benefiting from the high reputation of Superman and Supergirl, many ordinary people came out of their homes to accept Rao's gifts under the premise that they vouched for them with their reputations. At first, there were only a few people, but this number increased by thousands in less than half an hour. The patients didn't need medical cabins or medicine. They could be healed after receiving the blessings of Rao's believers. Many habitual criminals would turn over a new leaf and become virtuous people after receiving the blessings. The African warlords had no choice but to put down their weapons and give everyone the right to live. Rao even personally took action. Many of the harsh natural environments became green mountains and clear waters. Resources were redistributed, and no one starved anymore. Disease, war, sin, poverty, and the problems that plagued mankind for thousands of years seemed to have been eliminated. This was just the beginning. Chapter 870. Raoul descended on Earth like the sun. He was warm and made everyone feel the light. However, he did not allow the existence of other gods. On the 3rd day of his arrival on Earth, he started a war between the gods. A war between the gods? Thea sneered. This was a term that was no longer used in modern society. She and Darkseid did not boast about the war between the gods. How dare an alien who came out of nowhere say something like that? What happened in the end? In the end, countless zealots came out of the spaceship. They attacked Atlantis without caring about the sacrifices. The Sea King walked out of another room dejectedly. Mia, who was beside him, looked even worse. At the same time, Mia brought Thea a piece of bad news. Poseidon died in the battle. It was Rao who personally took action. That day, the sea was raging with huge waves. All the Atlanteans witnessed the battle. The battle lasted for an entire day. In the end, unlike the Sea King who grew up on land, Mia had a certain level of faith in Poseidon. Now that her faith had been defeated, she did not know how to react. Poseidon died. Thea did not point out that Mia's word died was not accurate. It was difficult for gods to die completely. Even if they were chopped into 7 or 8 pieces, leaving only their heart and head, they could regain consciousness after a few decades of worship. However, it would take a long time before they could return to the world. At first, Thea thought that Raoul was a liar. However, the fact that he was able to kill Poseidon moved her. Poseidon's strength was not to be underestimated. Even if the god of death had absorbed much of his origin, he still had the strength of a first-tier god with the help of the sea. She thought that if she were to fight him, it would take her a few hours to win. However, it would be much more difficult to kill him. If a veteran god wanted to escape, he would have many tricks up his sleeve. Moreover, it was in the sea. Thea could not figure out why Poseidon did not retreat. She asked a few questions. Mia was too far away to see what Raoul had done. Seeing that there were too few clues, she did not care much about Poseidon. What about Diana? Did she join the War of Atlantis? I'm not sure. She was thrown into a strange tunnel by Raoul, and we didn't see her after that. She wasn't there, and you weren't there either. Superman helped Raoul like a madman, and that's our current situation. Batman even showed her the scene at that time. Diana wasn't the only one who was sucked into a spiral tunnel. The Flash Barry and Ayres West were also sucked in. Thea frowned as she watched. Ayres was really a fierce fighter. How did a normal person like her get involved? However, Diana was not in danger, which made her feel much more relaxed. This tunnel looked strange, but it was undoubtedly a time tunnel. Search. After instructing his lackeys on the timeline to search, the two speedsters of the rapid ballistic path spread out a large net. With the help of the Master of Time, it wasn't difficult to find them. After all, they weren't Batman who was randomly teleported. Thea heaved a sigh of relief. This combination of Jars and Galau had caught her off guard. Jars had been reborn 3 times, then what about Galau? Was he new here, or had he transmigrated 3 or 2 times? No one knew. All right, I've got the gist of it. So what's the problem now? She was a little impatient. She wanted to quickly solve this mess. Whether it was a battle or an argument, it didn't matter. The problem now is that we haven't figured out where the problem is. Constantine sat at the side with a cigarette in his mouth and a smile that wasn't a smile. Galau can indeed bring peace to Earth. That's what the divination said. Madame Shangju, who always pretended to be transparent, said something rare. It also eliminates all kinds of injustices, Zatanna said with the same conflicted tone. But that's at the expense of the freedom of ordinary people. They've all been brainwashed, Constantine immediately retorted. They haven't. Our magic has checked. They don't show any signs of being controlled. The two exchanged a few words and started arguing again. Batman gave Thea a look. You see, we haven't even made up our minds internally. The young lady listened patiently for a while. In general, there were 2 opinions within Hero. One was that they were happy to see it happen. If there was no brainwashing or coercion, then they should welcome Galau. After all, Superman trusted him, and they trusted Superman. Like Zatanna, Atom Man, and Batwoman, many people held this view. If they couldn't bring peace to Earth and someone else could, then they didn't have to stop it. They even had to support it. This view was the mainstream. It had to be said that Superman's huge reputation played a role. Even the Sea King, who was kicked out of his home, didn't think that Galau had done anything wrong. Apart from some casualties when he broke through the gate, he didn't hurt the Atlanteans. He only killed Poseidon. The Atlanteans warmly welcomed this god and invited him into the palace as though they were welcoming a king's army. This made the Sea King question the legitimacy of his rule over Atlantis. Was he too unpopular? Naturally, there were people with different views. One of them was the conspiracy theorist Batman. He believed that there was a price to pay for power. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Lex Luthor had the same view as him. According to Baldy Luthor, there was a conspiracy, a big conspiracy. Baldy Luthor was very unhappy when he heard that the god of Krypton had come to Earth. He was now working overtime to analyze Galau's followers. He dissected, sliced, and used all kinds of underhanded methods. He felt that there was a problem. Could everyone on Earth be benevolent, righteous, and wise? He wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. There must be some unknown secret. The last person who had an opposing view had to be emphasized. The Joker. This guy had escaped when Batman went missing. After that, Nightwing inherited the mantle, causing the Joker to be depressed for a period of time. It wasn't until Batman returned that he went out to commit crimes again. Galau's arrival also stopped the chaos in Gotham. The Joker couldn't tolerate a Gotham full of saints. He was now leading his subordinates to fight a guerrilla war with Galau's followers on Earth. Determined to fight and never compromise, the Joker could be said to be the guy with the strongest resistance. Batman, the Joker, and Luthor were the three outstanding people on Earth. They were the vanguard of the anti-Laurian movement. The remaining people didn't have a firm attitude. For example, Constantine was arguing with Zatanna and didn't oppose it as much as he said. Thea took a deep breath. This Galau was really good. He didn't need to scheme. He only relied on practical actions and small favors to conquer Earth. What do you think? Batman was waiting for her opinion, or rather, her choice. Chapter 871. He's just a fake god. Is there such a thing as unearned happiness in this world? Money and health are all automatically delivered to your door. This goes against the basic laws of the universe. There must be a big problem here. Just sit and wait. Everything will get better. Then what's the point of having her as the goddess of trade? Rao is definitely an enemy. However, Thea didn't understand why the ghost stranger and the rest didn't do anything. Instead, they just watched everything happen. Next, she went to see Fiora. The female adjutant had some genetic damage and was now self-healing. Conventional treatment couldn't be used. She then contacted a few of her subordinates on Earth. After knowing that Death Knell and Poison Ivy were by her mother's side, she was completely relieved. I'll go and see what this Rao is capable of. Thea left behind a sentence and teleported to Earth. She concealed her tracks and landed on Earth. She sensed the flow of time here and squeezed in sideways. She didn't break the enchantment that enveloped the entire world. The flow of time inside and outside was different. Once it was broken, many ordinary people with poor health might not be able to withstand it. She had to observe carefully. Warmth, sunshine, walking on the road. The city was no longer as noisy as before. Everyone was still living a normal life, but their faces were filled with smiles of happiness. There were no thieves or robberies. Everyone was law-abiding. They greeted each other kindly when they met and gave each other their blessings when they left. This place was as good as heaven. Thea saw two Caucasian policemen kindly giving directions to a black guy. The gangs that wreaked havoc on the streets were diligently helping ordinary people to mow lawns and deliver milk. Everything was so beautiful and encouraging. There were no signs of being brainwashed. Everyone was sane. They were just doing things spontaneously and helping others. Thea also saw a follower of Rao that Batman mentioned. He was wearing a long robe and holding a long cane. He stopped a biker gang. With just a few words, the biker gang took off his nose ring and earring and cried like a child. He loudly said that he wanted to turn over a new leaf. There was also a large group of people cheering for him. Praise Rao! Praise Rao! Cheers could be heard from time to time. Everyone thanked Rao from the bottom of their hearts. No one realized that their outburst of emotions was a little abrupt. It was as if praising this god was a matter of course, as smooth as breathing and drinking water. This place was even more heavenly than heaven. It was King fake. Thea glanced sideways from time to time. How could an earthling do something like this? It was so fake that it was disgusting. It was not difficult to find Rail. He did not hide at all. Instead, he stayed in the metropolis and waited for her arrival. Silver white soft armor, red cloak, tall and straight figure. When Thea saw him, this fellow opened his arms and floated in the air like a martyr, his body flashing with countless golden lights. Rao's face was still young, with a square face and big ears. He looked very dignified, but his silver-white hair added a unique wisdom to him. Coupled with his eyes that seemed to be able to see through the world, an indescribable holiness arose spontaneously, as if he was born to be a ruler. He had to admit that it looked really good. It would be even better if the building under his feet wasn't the Quinn building. Thea was speechless. This guy must have seen her before. He was floating at the top of Quinn's building. He definitely didn't pick her randomly. You are Rao? You don't look like much. Thea floated in the air and looked at him at the same level. At the same time, she carefully observed the fluctuations of his divine power. She thought that he was a powerful Kryptonian, just like Shea. It was not incredible for a powerful alien to kill a god. Bao Lang had done it before. But she didn't expect that this guy was really a god, and a god of faith that had long been thrown into the dustbin of history. This was a very rare thing. It was easy for a god of faith to become a god, but they also died quickly. 95% of the gods who died today were gods of faith. They were weak, had no endurance, and lacked combat power. They listened to the complaints of their believers every day. Most of them were mentally ill or had a great change in temperament. If they had lost their sense of self, how could they talk about becoming a god? In short, this path was very narrow. Like Apollo, Ars, and the others were gods of faith. Apollo had the support of the sun and could hold on for a long time, but Ars. Thea felt that after Rao eliminated the global war, Ars would die directly. Logically speaking, Rao also walked the path of a god of faith. Him coming to Thea to provoke her was almost the same as sending himself to death. But this guy was very strong, and his strong faith had pushed his divine power to a very high point. In Thea's view, this guy was almost the same as God's father. Rao also glanced at her. He was indifferent and didn't speak. He didn't speak, but many ordinary people below began to clamor. Come down, don't blaspheme the true God. Get out of the United States, woman of the Quinn family. Oh my God. What is she doing? Rao, please don't be angry. Thea turned a deaf ear. Her attention was on Rao. Good job brainwashing, but this is your way. What's the use of a group of ordinary people to smear me? I don't care at all. She wasn't a traditional superhero. If everyone objected, would she be so upset that she couldn't eat? If there were people who weren't afraid of death and wanted to test the speed of Death Knell's knife, she didn't mind sending people to kill 10 or 20 of them as a deterrent. She had been in the soul business for more than half a year. Ordinary people were scolding her, and they wanted her to take it lying down. Sorry, she didn't have that kind of self-restraint. Moira and Malcolm's blood was naturally not holy. Thea. Sister Thea. Superman and Supergirl flew to Rao's side from afar. The two of them tried to stop their war. Rao really wants to help the people of Earth. He has no selfish motives. Please believe me, Superman said very sincerely. On the other side, Kara also advised her not to fight with Rao. Both sides should work together to build New Earth. New Earth. Are you sure it will still be Earth after the construction and not Krypton? Superman, have you forgotten about Shea? Have you forgotten about Zod? They are in cahoots. Do you still remember? According to Shea, we have stopped them twice. This is the third time. Don't you think there's something wrong with this? How can you believe him so easily? The two of them blocked the path. Thea watched for a long time, but she didn't find any abnormalities with Superman and Supergirl. There was no mind control, no magic, no psionic power, not even any black technology. With her knowledge, she couldn't see any problems. She also didn't see any race or individual in the universe that had the ability to change one's will. Chapter 872. We are not being forced. Rao is a true god. He is selfless, Kara explained anxiously. On the other side, Superman was in a trance. All his memories were still there. He remembered what happened today, yesterday, and even many years ago. He remembered flying back to Earth and having a long talk with Rao. After that, he had done many good things for him. The joy that came from the bottom of his heart was still lingering in his mind. Thea looked at Superman's eyes, which changed from confusion to determination, for about 2 seconds. She judged that they must have been tricked. Among the 3 Kryptonians, Kara had the weakest willpower and could not resist Rao's bewitchment. Fura was the strongest. After all, she had been wearing the yellow lamp for so many years. Fear had a high resistance to mind control. Superman was in between the two. Perhaps his subconscious had noticed something wrong, but it was suppressed by the surface consciousness. Follow me. There must be something wrong with your bodies. I need high-tech equipment to assist in the examination. Thea was ready to take the two of them away, but she also knew that it would not be so easy unless Rao pretended to be a fraud or a fool. Sure enough, Rao was still elegant, but his words were a bit harsh. Evil woman, don't try to bewitch my believers. Do you want to try the fire of justice in this world? Leave now. Rao first put a big label on her, then put himself on the moral high ground to reprimand her. The ordinary people below began to shout crazily as if they had taken an aphrodisiac. Go away, witch. You are not welcome here. We stand firmly together. We are not afraid of your magic. Haha. I'm dying of laughter. Thea was very annoyed by these people. She forced herself to control her temper. She knew that she must not fall into their trap. However, it was not her style to be scolded and not fight back. She had always been the one taking advantage of others. No one had ever taken advantage of her. Her cold gaze swept across the people below. Everyone felt that she was looking at them. Their hearts turned cold. Their voices instantly fell until there was no more noise. Magic. Do you really want to see what magic is? I hope you won't regret it. The surging mana became as black as ink under the influence of divine power. Countless black smoke gathered from all directions. The ordinary people all looked at the sky in horror. The originally sunny afternoon seemed to be covered by a thin layer of gauze. The veil grew thicker and thicker until it covered the entire sky. The clouds became thicker and thicker, as if they were condensing some kind of monster. Unlike the Black Death Emperor's peaceful death, her path was to peak at death from life and return to life from death. She was still very far away from this realm, but at this moment, there was already a trace of an embryonic form. The black clouds seemed to have a unique rhythm. As the clouds moved, it was as if they were breathing. There was even a faint singing voice in the wind. The more one listened to it, the colder they felt. Such a strange phenomenon made many ordinary people realize that something was wrong, and they all ran back home. Those who ran away were naturally looked down upon by the remaining members. They were said to have weak beliefs. They continued to shout at the sky, saying things like, "Kill me if you can, we're not afraid of you." Thea, don't. Superman's memory was not damaged. He thought that Thea was going to kill him, so he rushed over and tried to stop her. I'm just giving them something to do. She grabbed Superman with one hand and used her psychic power to check his body. She still did not find any abnormalities. With this delay, the effect of the magic was not maximized, but it was enough for ordinary people to suffer. The sun was blocked, and darkness began to fall. Black snowflakes slowly fell from the sky. Of course, there were impurities in the air, but more of it was the haze in her heart. She could use this opportunity to release all of it. Thea was not afraid that these negative emotions would affect ordinary people, because Raoul, who was so bright, would find a way to purify them. Raoul frowned, but he did not hesitate to fly to the highest altitude and began to disperse the black clouds. Unfortunately, he underestimated these negative emotions. Emotions that were connected to death were not so easy to purify. He was like a super big light bulb, shining for a long time, but only illuminating a block under his feet. Kara, come with me. Clark, you come too. Trust me, we've known each other for so many years. I won't harm you. Although Supergirl was unwilling, she still followed her old habits and prepared to be checked. Superman hesitated for a moment, but also agreed to this plan. No, do you still remember those people you helped? Do you still remember those happy faces? Aren't we a family? Help me, help me. Isn't this your wish all along? Children, don't leave me. Rao was like a loving father who had been abandoned by his children. His eyes were filled with emotion as he looked at Superman and Supergirl. At this time, Thea felt that Raoul was simply disgusting. This guy was sincere, and she could see that his words were from the bottom of his heart. The more he acted like this, the more disgusted she felt. He was too immersed in the act. Did he really think that he was the god of light? Think of Louise, think of Lena. They're all waiting for you far away. At least check. If there's no problem, you can come back. Thea really wanted to take this Raoul to another planet and beat him up. Unfortunately, the nearby space seemed to be fixed, and teleportation was very slow. She did not want to fight in the metropolis, so she could only try to pull Superman and Supergirl away first. Don't think of bewitching my people. Raoul pulled out a lightsaber from the void and slashed at Thea. Thea's dark attribute was too strong, and it was not suitable for her to use a sacred sword in this state. Black Death King's scythe was also resisting her, so she had no choice but to take out a long sword from the inventory. The two swords clashed, and quickly exchanged 7 or 8 moves. Thea originally thought that Raoul was about the same as the Heavenly Father, but in the end, she found that it was just SOSO. Raoul's divine power was very weak, like a castle on the sand. It looked solemn and dignified, but in fact, it would collapse with a push. "Ha, you're so weak. And I treated you like I was facing a great enemy." Amidst the snowflakes, she swung her sword and forced Raoul to retreat. The two swords clashed. Raoul's light divine power could be destroyed by Thea with a wave of her hand, but her death divine power was extremely difficult for Raoul to deal with. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. Thea attacked while trying to get information out of him. "You called them your people. Does that mean you admit that you're a Kryptonian? How did you live until now? According to the Green Lantern Corps records, your lifespan is only 200 years. Did you use some secret technique or divine artifact to extend your lifespan?" Thea blocked the lightsaber, and then quickly hit Raoul's shoulder with her palm. Huh! Even if she was not good at strength, she could still flatten a mountain. However, Raoul was not affected at all. He was not affected at all and even slashed her back. Chapter 873. Thea hurriedly parried the attack. The black snow around her provided her with a lot of cover. At the same time, Raoul's light attribute was greatly weakened. The cold darkness in the air disgusted him. It was more of a hindrance to his vision. Even if he used his mental power to perceive the surrounding snow, the divine power of death of the same origin greatly affected his judgment. Raoul was a trickster, and his swordsmanship was ordinary. After 3 moves, Thea saw another opportunity. She feigned to Raoul's side and stabbed him in the ribs. The long sword that she randomly chose was at most a semi-divine artifact. But with the blessing of the divine power of death, it was comparable to a top divine artifact. The angle, speed, and power of the sword had reached the perfect level of swordsmanship. However, something even stranger happened. Raoul's body was squeezed out of the sword. The death aura was purified in less than a second, and his body returned to normal. Not even a drop of blood flowed out. Holy **T. Thea felt that since she saw TUR until now, she had been surprised more than usual in the past month. What the hell? His recovery speed was too fast. When their weapons collided, Raoul dissolved the death aura that came into contact with him like a snail. But the death aura that invaded his body dissolved quickly. Passive was faster than active. It didn't make sense. Thea was full of questions. Relying on her good swordsmanship, she stabbed Raoul twice. But Raoul took both attacks as if nothing had happened. Thea felt that it was time for her to retreat. Raoul's real strength was at the level of a wasteland wolf. He was not much stronger than TUR, but his skills were too strange. She was going to go back and discuss it with Batman. Take your believers and shovel the snow and ice. She increased the magic power supply of the black snow again. Even the street under Raoul's feet was covered. The black snow, accompanied by freezing rain and cold wind, began to wreak havoc in the city. The temperature in the city dropped rapidly. Many citizens who had been shouting slogans shrank their necks and hid indoors to keep warm. Don't you like to gather and shout slogans? It had been snowing heavily for 3 days. She wanted to see who had such a devout belief. A large number of snowflakes seemed to be alive in her palm. They gathered into a shadow cage and trapped Raoul. She turned around and ran with the 2 Kryptonians. Sister Thea, Raoul is really not a bad person. You've misunderstood him, Kara explained along the way. The eldest young miss responded with a series of ens and ahs while pondering over the other party's strangeness. Thea felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Unafraid of death energy attacks, counterattacking as if nothing had happened, and not getting injured no matter how she attacked. Death Chi? Black Death Emperor? White Lantern? Suddenly, she thought of the problem. This state was very similar to when she wore the White Lantern to share the damage, and the other party's power of faith was also unimaginably huge. Faith, gathering all living beings to share the damage. The white lamp, a clue that connected all the conditions, naturally could deduce the answer. This Raoul must have seen his white lamp in a timeline that he didn't know about, and then used some method to simulate a small part of its functions. Everyone who received his blessings had their life force connected with him. That was why he could attack Thea as if nothing had happened. It was also through this method that he absorbed the faith of the Atlanteans and killed Poseidon, who was of similar strength. Thea felt that her guess was not far from the truth. Poseidon had to admit that his death was a little unjust. Unlike the white lamp's automatic connection to the universe's life force, Raoul's was more manual. He personally went to the battlefield to develop believers, and then expanded the audience. There was a lot of investment in the early stage, and the speed of development was slow. However, once the scale was established, it was not much worse than the white lamp. Kara, oh my God, are you okay? After returning to the new world and finding Batman, Lena ran out and gave Kara a big hug. Kara was a little hesitant, but she still responded with a blushing face when Lena asked for a kiss. Luther, who walked out of the room, and Superman, who came in through the door, looked at each other strangely, but neither of them said a word. To break the silence, Thea quickly dragged Batman out. Superman trusted Batman a lot. Even though Luther was also a little subdued here, he still did not overreact. This is the result of my 2 days of research. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Luther clicked on the screen. There was a scan of a human brain on both sides. The one on the left is normal, and the one on the right is Raoul's believer. There seems to be no problem, but after my research, here, and here have all undergone subversive changes. Luther did not specifically explain his research methods. Instead, he zoomed in on the images and pointed out 3 subtle differences for them to see. Except for Kara, who was a poor student and did not understand anything, everyone knew very well that the brain dominated human behavior patterns. Could it be an individual phenomenon? This brain area has been expanded in a small area, and it is not a strong argument. Thea, who was a leading figure in modern medicine, quickly raised her doubts. Luther was not angry. He had an unusual admiration for science. This is the unified answer I came up with after randomly searching for 70 believers. How dare you attack ordinary people? Superman angrily grabbed Luther's collar. It was your Kryptonian god who attacked the Earthlings first. Luther's voice was louder than Superman's, and he stared back at Superman fiercely. Looking at the anger in Luther's eyes, Thea even suspected that this guy's eyes could emit omega rays. She hurriedly pulled the two apart. Their cousin and their lover's brother were about to attack each other. The 2 girls looked at each other, and they were a little at a loss. Fortunately, Batman had the special ability to not let people stray from the topic. He brought the topic back. What's the matter with the Kryptonians' abnormality? I didn't receive any so-called blessings. There was no physical contact. Our cell density is dozens of times higher than that of the Earthlings, so this can't happen to us. Even though Superman hated Luther, he did not think that Luther was lying. Raoul had indeed done something to ordinary people. Genes. Your genes contain the message of loyalty to Raoul. Normally, if you see Raoul, you will automatically believe him. This message is deeply engraved in your genes. As an expert on Kryptonians, Luther gave the answer without thinking. However, the answer made Superman and Supergirl a little confused. Was he really wrong? Superman had realized that something was wrong with him before, and he was mentally prepared. Now, he just gritted his teeth and pondered. On the other hand, Supergirl Kara was very sad. This was worse than being controlled. They had consciousness and memory. They were willing to introduce Raoul to the Earthlings. It was all over. The good reputation that they had painstakingly accumulated was ruined. Ordinary people would never trust them in the future. Chapter 874. Kara, who had been helping others and was proud of it, suddenly felt dizzy. She was so annoyed that she wanted to bang her head against the wall when she thought about how she would be scolded in the future. However, she still worshipped Rao. She was both regretful and happy at the same time. She felt that she had become 2 different people. Thea saw that something was wrong with her and quickly knocked Kara out. Kara's kindness is being used. Take her to rest. We will take care of things here. Thea handed Kara to Lena. It was good to have someone to accompany her at this time. It was not difficult to guess what Supergirl was thinking. She was annoyed and depressed. She had worked hard for 30 years, and now she was back to square one. There was no praise or support, and now she had to bear the blame. This was a test for the little girl. However, Thea believed that Kara would be able to get out of this predicament. Kryptonians had a tough heart. Superman, who was beside her, was very calm. This guy had gone through too many ups and downs. He was worshipped by thousands of people, then misunderstood and controlled. He got back on his feet and earned his reputation again. He was misunderstood and controlled again. He had lost count of how many times this had happened. Although they had found the problem, it was still troublesome to solve it. The Kryptonian genes were very strong, which was a good thing in normal times. However, it was not so good now. Even if Thea had all the records of the Kryptonian genes, with Luthor's research, they would still have a way to modify the Kryptonian genes. Who knew what would happen if they removed part of the genetic information? As long as we don't face RAO, we will be fine. We can put it aside temporarily. What about the ordinary people? Superman asked worriedly. As long as we kill RAO, we can free everyone. He is the source of everyone's information. Before Luthor could finish, Thea interrupted him. No, it's impossible. He is now connected to everyone's life. Let's not talk about whether we can kill him. Once RAO dies, everyone who is connected to him will die too. Is there a distance limit? What if the battlefield is on another planet? Will the connection be cancelled if the main body loses consciousness? Will the kryptonite work? What about the red sun radiation? Will it work if we make the ordinary people unconscious? Batman asked a lot of questions. Thea had thought about some of them, but she had not. Not only her, but Luthor, Superman, and Batman, who had raised the question, were also deep in thought. Even if there is a distance limit, he is a god, and the area he connects to is very large. Raoul is the center, and his spaceship is the node. He is not only connecting to the people of Earth, but there are also many intelligent life forms on the spaceship, and there is definitely more than one spaceship like this. Thea frowned slightly. She did not tell the truth. Instead, she was very conservative and vague. On the way back, she had already sent the Yellow Lantern Green Lantern bug tribe to scout the entire universe. The result was horrifying. There were at least 3,000 Kryptonian spaceships similar to the one Raoul had landed on Earth. These spaceships were distributed in sectors 2813, 2814, and 3125. Earth was not Raoul's first stop. From the numbers gathered by his subordinates, it could be seen that he had already controlled at least 100 planets. Some planets were 10 times or even 100 times larger than Earth, and there were tens of billions of intelligent life forms on them. There was no way to calculate the exact number of people under their control, but Kerrigan had reported to her that there were 1 trillion intelligent beings. No matter how fierce the attack was, when it was divided among 1 trillion people, there was not much left. The Black Death Emperor had a lot to say about this. They discussed for a long time, but there was no result. Thea was summoned away by her mother. The White House was even more lively. She did not even have a sip of water before she was dragged into a meeting. Several leaders of the United Nations were on the line at this time, and everyone had a sad look on their faces. Thea heard a few words and understood why they were so sad. Raoul wanted to abolish the borders between countries and eliminate artificial barriers, regardless of skin color or nationality, and establish a global village. The general idea was something like one world, one dream, and so on. In terms of humanities, theory, social development, and resource allocation, this was definitely a good thing. However, from a political point of view, it was absolutely terrible. A group of old politicians tore off their disguises, and at this time, all of them were cursing with righteous indignation. Of course, they would not say that they were reluctant to give up their power. They talked about values, democracy, and freedom, social justice, and legal construction, and a lot of other things. In short, Raoul was definitely done for. They were not greedy for power, but from a fair point of view, they were boycotting him. Moira saw her come in and left the vice president to accompany a group of people. She wanted to discuss the next step with her daughter. If they really could not deal with it, then they could only run away. How is it? There were too many people around, so she asked very implicitly. Very bad, but it is not to the point of no return. Thea thought about it and still sent a message to her mother. The enemy was very difficult to deal with, but it was not to the point of giving up everything. Thea was now very helpless. Eliminating war, eliminating poverty, and uniting all intelligent life, everything Raoul did was very correct from the macroscopic point of view of the universe. On this point, the will of the world was on his side. This was also the main reason why the ghost stranger did not do anything and just watched all of this happen. Excluding some of the other party's provocative actions, to be fair, Raoul did everything from the bottom of his heart. He was indeed a kind god. Compared to him, Thea was as black as coal. The mother and daughter briefly exchanged information. Not bad, Raoul's methods were very gentle and did not escalate to the point of confrontation. However, a large number of soldiers ran away to worship Raoul, causing the power in the hands of the politicians to shrink rapidly. Maybe in 7 days, maybe in 10 days, their subordinates would all run to Raoul's camp. At that time, they would be worse than ordinary people. Thea described the situation as extremely difficult. Then, she thought about countermeasures while watching the politicians complain. It was ironic. After fighting for the people for so long, fighting against Zod, Doomsday, Darkseid, and the Black Death Emperor, the people who scolded her the most were the people. Some said that she was a witch, some said that she was a demon, and the ones who firmly supported her and said that she was a human hero were actually these politicians. At the same time, the other members of the anti-Raoul group were also making their own preparations. Batman created a kind of solvent that could make ordinary people unconscious and cut off Raoul's control over the people of Earth. There was also a kind of reagent that could make ordinary people return to normal. The Quinn Group, Wayne Group, and Luther Group, as well as the satellites of several major countries, were all mobilized. They were prepared to spray the solvent on Earth at the same time. On the other side, Luther was also adjusting his new armor. During the Night of Darkness, he was surprised to find that he was very talented in combat. At this critical moment, he was prepared to charge out at the critical moment as the savior of all mankind. If he could give Raoul a vicious blow, that would be even better. Chapter 875. The clown, who was in Gotham, used his actions to help the anti-RAO alliance. He planted bombs in the city square and broadcasted bloody scenes on TV. His best move was to disguise himself as a believer and infiltrate the enemy's inner circle. Then, he used his submachine gun and rocket launcher. A few extraterrestrial believers who did not look like they were from Earth were given special attention. Out of the 12 high priests of RAO, 5 of them were killed in a day. Other than one of them who was slightly normal, the other 4 had superpowers. However, they were useless in front of the clown. The believers were confused and could not predict the clown's movements. They set up 3 traps in a row, but the clown easily saw through them and counterattacked. They lost many elites. Indescribable intelligence, unpredictable behavior, and the trait of not being blessed. This was the report that the high priests gave to RAO. After the clown's crazy destruction, Gotham City, which had taken a turn for the better, entered the world of terror again. After a few exchanges, even Raoul's most loyal follower started to feel fear toward this man with pale skin and green hair. However, the clown only felt that this was a game. When the city was in chaos, he would stop and enjoy the sweetness of it. However, when the high priests of RAO regrouped and restored order, the clown would jump out and play another game. After 3 days of tug-of-war, the high priests were almost driven crazy. They could only ask for help from their boss. However, RAO could not leave at that time. He was leading the believers to remove the snow. The black snow fell for 3 days. He used all his divine power and finally dispersed the black clouds. However, dispersing the black clouds did not mean the end. It only meant that they had entered the intermediate stage. Metropolis was too cold. The temperature was -20 degrees Celsius at noon. The ground was frozen with a thick layer of ice. It was difficult to walk on the road. Other than the most devout believers, the normal people chose to stay at home. Rao was a god. He could not use a shovel and hammer to sweep the road. He could only leave this job to his believers. It was tiring to do voluntary work in the cold, so it was inevitable that he would complain. Rao could only continue to shine and use his divine power to help the citizens remove the snow. With this delay, he could no longer care about the clown in Gotham. Raoul, who was known for his omnipotence, did not disappoint his believers in the end. He desperately squandered his divine power, and after 5 days, he finally restored the metropolis to normal. A few things happened in the past 5 days. Diana and Barry were found by the Golden Vanguard. They wandered to the 30th century. Diana participated in the establishment of the Superhero Legion, while Barry and Ayres worked hard to create humans. In the end, they gave birth to a new life. After testing, it was a pair of twins. Time travel had too much of an impact on pregnant women. He could only leave Iris in the 30th century and wait until she gave birth to the child. Diana's return gave Thea an idea. Time travel? Are you planning to go to the past and destroy Rao? Will the Olympic Games in this world disappear? It was still Batman who raised the question. Thea even thought maliciously, why didn't he become a contestant? This old man had too many questions. She thought for a moment. I don't know if it will affect the result. After all, the law of causality still has to be followed. But Raoul's situation is very special. She did not know how fate planned Raoul's trajectory. She was very vague. In fact, Thea mainly wanted to see how Raoul gathered the vitality of all living beings on himself. Gods could be eternal, but those machines and magic devices definitely could not. In the Guardian's memory, Raoul was the founder of the Kryptonian civilization, but he only lived for 200 years. Now, not only did he live to this day, but he also became a god, absorbing the vitality of his believers to replenish himself. This was the only way Thea could think of. She could go to Raoul's earliest era and destroy this device. After that, she could easily kill him. Are you planning to go to Krypton? Batman quickly figured out her idea and lowered his head to think. Krypton. On the other side, Kara, who was a little listless, suddenly became energetic. Can I go? Anyway, I can't help here. Looking at Kara's lifeless face, Milady did not know how to persuade her. She thought for a moment. I'm planning to go to Krypton in ancient times. It's completely different from what you remember. Kara was very determined. Thea tried to persuade her twice. Seeing that she was determined, she could only agree. Seeing that Lena was about to go, she quickly added, Krypton's atmosphere is similar to Earth's, but the gravity there is 10 times that of Earth, so, what she meant was that ordinary people should not go and cause trouble. I'll go. I want to go. The two heroes, Batman and Luthor, spoke at the same time. They said that 10 times the gravity was nothing. They had black technology to deal with it. Others could go, but not Luthor. God knows if he would blow up Krypton in advance. In the end, Thea dragged Batman and Supergirl along. Although Superman could not help to deal with Raoul, his high reputation could attract all the superheroes and dissuade the ordinary people who had not yet received the blessing. Diana, on the other hand, was the main force to deal with this god, Raoul. After everything was arranged, the three of them took the Council's time spaceship to the past. The coordinates were 250,000 years in the past, Krypton in ancient times. There was very little vegetation on the surface of the planet. The red sun hung in the sky, and a creature that looked like a wild boar was looking for food. Suddenly, it realized that it had bumped into something. It looked at the empty ground with its small eyes, and with its low intelligence, it ran away. The spaceship deactivated its stealth mode. The hatch opened slowly. Kara was the first to run out. The red sun made her lose all her superpowers. She was used to the yellow sun. Under the red sun, it was a little dazzling. However, the smell of Krypton still intoxicated her. This was her hometown, even if it was a long time ago. Batman and Thea walked out slowly. The gravity is really strong. Batman had changed his clothes. At this time, he was adjusting the parameters of his clothes with the equipment on his wrist. From a distance, it looked similar to his usual outfit. In fact, it was a high-tech skysuit. Milady looked around indifferently. This place did not affect her much. It was just 10 times the gravity. The Kryptonians of this era did not have advanced weapons because of the existence of the Red Sun. They did not have strong bodies. They were a group of primitive people. Other than being careful of the god Raoul coming from the timeline, there was really nothing to be afraid of. After looking around, she pointed to the southwest. That is Kanda, where Raoul's original tribe was. It is the light of Krypton's civilization. Batman glanced at it casually and did not say anything. To him, Kanda was no different from Toronto. Supergirl was different. She whispered it twice. The few of them walked forward as usual. The gravity here was too strong. Earth's mechanical equipment could not run. Fortunately, the distance was not far. Batman, who was good at spying in the dark, went ahead to investigate. Chapter 876. Thea saw Kara's nostalgic look and asked casually, "Have you lived in Kanda?" I don't know if this Kanda is the same city as the one in my memory, but I have lived in Kanda for 4 years. Thea patted her on the shoulder to comfort her. She had to admit that the Kryptonians were good at preserving cultural relics. Kanda City was not a 1,000-year-old or 10,000-year-old ancient capital. It was a 250,000-year-old ancient capital. If she remembered correctly, Kanda City had been taken away by Brainiac in a glass dome before the Krypton explosion. It should still be sleeping in one of his collections. If she had the time, she could get it back. Not long after, they met up with Batman and met a Kryptonian hunting team. These guys were still stuck in the tribal era. The existence of the Red Sun made their bodies not much different from ordinary people on Earth. It was nonsense to tell a group of primitive people that they were time travelers from another planet. Thea knew a little about the history of Krypton, but this era was too old, and there were few written records. Rao was like a legend to the later generations of Kryptonians. It was a sign of erudition to know about Rao and Kanda at this time. Thea was good at making up lies. She described the 3 of them as tribal messengers from 2 mountains away, and this time, they were here to seek an audience with the chief of Rao. The ordinary Kryptonians were confused, but the leader was knowledgeable. He knew that there were several tribes on the other side of the mountains and the sea that were not inferior to them. After a few simple questions, he found that Thea's Kryptonian accent was strange. He thought that she was an outsider. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with her, he happily led the 3 of them to meet the chief. There were no rules in the primitive society, and the 3 of them soon met Rao. He was a handsome middle-aged man, but his hair was mottled instead of the silver white of the future. At this time, he was not a god. He was just a wise and tired old man. "Are you looking for me?" Rao raised his head and looked at the 3 of them. He was not an ordinary guard. Even though the current situation on Krypton limited his vision, a wise man would always be wise no matter where he was. He could tell that the 3 of them were unusual. Just by looking at their temperaments, they didn't seem like people who were hungry. Furthermore, the 3 of them were wearing completely different clothes. Supergirl was wearing her uniform cloak, Batman was also wearing black clothes, and Thea was dressed very casually. However, it was precisely because of this that she looked abnormal. "Who are you?" Rao raised his voice, and the surrounding guards hurriedly ran over with their spears, ready to protect the beloved tribal leader. Although Supergirl pretended to be powerful, she was actually just an ordinary person here. Batman looked at the approaching guards and was on high alert. Thea tried to sense it. The magical elements on Krypton were extremely scarce. No wonder it developed into a technological civilization. Although there weren't many of them, there were still some. She raised her hand and raised several earth walls, separating the 4 of them from the outside world. "Are you here to kill me?" There was no fear in Rao's expression. If killing him could solve the problem on Earth, Thea would definitely kill him without hesitation. However, she found that Rao's vitality was very unstable. It seemed like it could be extinguished with a breath, but in the next second, it would be replenished by several streams of vitality. This meant that his pseudo-white lamp experiment had already begun, but it was still very preliminary. You are doing something dangerous. You are depriving ordinary people of their lives to replenish yourself. Thea pointed out the problem directly. No, I am not forcing them. They are all willing. Look around. Only I can lead the tribe to prosperity. I did not take the initiative to hurt anyone. Listening to the guards shouting outside the wall, they tried their best to break through, but unfortunately, the earth walls were extremely sturdy with the support of magic. Rao realized that he was in a desperate situation, but he didn't have any fear of death. There was only unwillingness left in his words. There were many things he could do, but there was no time. He tried to persuade them with words in the end. He doesn't look like a bad guy. Batman asked in a low voice. He had been hiding for a few days because he was afraid of being brainwashed. Now that he met Rao face to face, he immediately found the key to the problem. Thea smiled bitterly. Of course not. He did not lie. Everything he said was from the bottom of his heart. I am afraid that only the few sages on earth can be compared to such a noble person. Don't be afraid of bad people doing bad things, but be afraid of good people doing bad things. When good people did bad things, their destructive power was 100 times greater than bad people. Let's not hurt him. Let's destroy the device that connects his vitality and let him die of old age. Thea didn't want to kill such a good person with a high moral character. She immediately nodded and withdrew her magic. A group of guards hurriedly stood guard beside Rao, and the hunting captain who had led them here rushed forward without a care for anything else. We don't mean any harm. Maybe we can talk. She flicked her finger and knocked away the attack. Rao realized that the guards were useless in front of Thea, so he waved his hand and signaled them to leave. He then led them into the room to talk. Who taught you this method of sharing vitality? She went straight to the point and asked the most important question. In my dream, a person who was covered in white light taught me, Rao said with uncertainty. Thea looked at him suspiciously. Did he come to Krypton in his dream? Bullshit. However, Rao didn't look like he was lying. 9 out of 10 people on Earth were lies, but Kryptonians didn't have the concept of lying. The future Rao must have returned to this era and taught her younger self how to use the vitality collection device. It was not difficult to guess. But how did this guy do it? Thea was a little confused. It was impossible for the old Golden Vanguard to meet her younger self. Her father knew that his wife was killed by the Wasteland Wolf, but he didn't go back to the past to remind her younger self. Time was very uncertain. The more one wanted to change the result, the more likely it was to make things worse. You have destroyed the tradition of freedom on Krypton. You are like a tyrant. Kara didn't say anything. She sensed Rao carefully and found that she had no intention of following him. It further confirmed the fact that Kryptonian genes had been tampered with. She was very distressed and finally couldn't help scolding him. Krypton. Rao was confused. Where are you talking about? Kara was shocked and hurriedly turned to look at Sia. She also covered her face and looked speechless. Why are you talking about Krypton with a caveman? Well, Krypton was named by your people 190,000 years in the future. It's okay. You don't have to be surprised. Look at my hand. Thea used a spell to erase Rao's memory of the past few seconds. Rao was a little confused. Thea looked back at Kara. Go on. After all, he is one of your people. Chapter 877. Oh, Supergirl said. She put on a serious face and was about to say something when she quickly retracted her words. She whispered, Kanda, is there such a name in this era? Thea was also stunned by the question. She thought carefully and said, Kanda should be the name of the 31st dynasty. Supergirl looked surprised. Then what should this place be called now? Thea racked her brains and frowned. She thought for a long time, but there was nothing in the Kryptonian genetic information or the Guardian's memory. Suddenly, she realized something was wrong. How would I know? This is the history of Krypton, Kara retorted softly, but I was sent to Earth before I could learn this. So, what you mean is that I should ask the education department on Earth to set up a Kryptonian history class? You were the one who didn't study hard. Moreover, can you not add the name of the place? Without the name of the place, it won't be impressive. Rao looked at them arguing in a low voice and was a little puzzled. He only remembered that this little girl seemed to want to say something to him. Batman, on the other hand, was speechless. He liked to study the secrets of Kryptonians, but he was not interested in the history of Kryptonian. Both of you? We still have a mission. Thea was criticizing the Kryptonians for not paying attention to history, while Kara retorted that Kryptonians had specialized personnel to study history, but she obviously did not. Batman hurriedly interrupted their conversation. The two quickly stopped talking and finally decided to let Kara do the talking. That. Have you thought about what you want to build here in the future? Kara chose her words carefully, but she was too cautious. Her tone, which was supposed to be harsh, made it sound like an interview. Rao was stunned. Did this group of people come all the way here just to talk about life and ideals with him? But there was nothing he could not say. I hope that my people can get out of this predicament. The old don't have to choose a place to die. The young babies, whether strong or weak, can survive. I hope that we can walk out of this mountain. I hope that everyone can walk proudly under the sun. Rao spoke very sincerely. Even though he had done very extreme things 250,000 years later, he had not deviated from his original path. He was still helping others, even if this method seemed to be evil. I admit that your goal is noble, but your method is wrong. Why do you think only you can lead your people to prosperity? Can't others do the same? Death is equal in front of everyone. Why don't you enjoy the rare peace? To an ordinary person, Thea's words could be interpreted as why don't you die, but she felt that Raoul did not care about life and death. Her words sounded like a bystander advising someone to rest. Unsurprisingly, Rao was not angry. Instead, he was rather determined. This is my responsibility. The responsibility that all of my people have given me. As long as this goal is not achieved, I will not back down. They weren't afraid of death, and they weren't greedy for power. They were just doing it for the responsibility on their shoulders. If the civil servants on Earth had such perseverance, they would have unified the universe long ago. At the same time, Thea had a new understanding of the stubbornness of the Kryptonians. With such an ancestor, it was no wonder that the Kryptonians she had met before were so stubborn. From Zod, Fura, Shah, Clark, Kara, and even the dog Krypton, Rao had imperceptibly influenced the Kryptonians to have an extraordinary temperament. Unswerving, never giving up, and willing to bear any burden for the sake of their ideals. She had to admit that the Kryptonians were an excellent race, and Rao's influence could not be ignored. You shouldn't put your personal will above everyone else. The spirit of free choice, isn't that Krypton, a tradition here? Kara was conflicted. On the one hand, she could see Rao's great ambition, but on the other hand, she felt that it was contrary to her values. How can that be? I have always followed this will. This is the cornerstone of our development, Rao retorted without any pretense. My children, I have never deprived you of your personal will. I just need your help. Is that wrong? Another Rao walked out of the air. He had long silver hair. It was the god Rao. He followed Thea and the others and asked Kara with a sad face. The two Raos stood side by side. Whether it was Batman or Kara, they were all on guard. Thea gently pulled them back. He has not fully entered this world. This is just a projection. When the two Raos stood together in time, there was no abnormality. This made Milady look at them for a while. The way the other party traveled through time was completely different from them. In her opinion, it was a bit like the wishing spell in magic. It gathered the faith of all beings and allowed the god to move freely in the timeline. In addition, the life force that God Rao consumed for the past 250,000 years was supplied by his believers. He was fundamentally different from the original ordinary person. The life force that originally belonged to him had been exhausted. This god Rao could be said to be the aggregate of all beings with his personal will. You are me. The ancient Rao looked at the familiar stranger beside him and was a little incredulous. For your ideals, you became a god. This is what you will look like in the future, Batman introduced him. The ancient Rao looked at the person beside him. Although the appearance was the same, the temperament was completely different. It was a little cold. There was no emotion in his eyes, and there was no respect for ordinary people. This is not him. You are not me. I am you. The two old men began to argue. Kara and Batman joined in, while Milady crossed her arms and watched the show outside. Kara quickly ran out of words and was eliminated. The main force of the debate became Batman and the ancient Rao to deal with God Rao. After 250,000 years, Rao's thoughts had unknowingly deviated to the gutter. Now that he was confronting his former self, the disharmony became more and more obvious. This also sounded the alarm for her. Rao was such a noble and self-disciplined Kryptonian, but in the end, he became unrecognizable. She was an earthling with complicated thoughts and low moral standards. It was really a headache for her to keep her original heart and stick to her original heart. You will hinder my grand goal. God Rao was a little speechless. He reached out to grab his past. Thea certainly would not let him have his way. All of you, back off. His energy has come in. Facing Rao's hand, a wind blade was thrown out. The two of them quickly exchanged a few blows. Sia didn't dare to use too much strength. Leoka was in the timeline. If she used too much strength and made a hole in the timeline, she wouldn't be able to live anymore. Who would be able to stand big cousin, second cousin, and third cousin every day? Come on if you want to. Under her water, Rao squeezed out with some effort. Chapter 878. Thea raised her hand and cast an ice storm. Although this spell had been brewing for a long time, its power was greatly reduced in Krypton, a place where magic was almost non-existent. It was originally 100 meters tall and dozens of meters in diameter, but now it was a miniature tornado with a height of 30 meters and a diameter of 8 meters. Even so, this spell was comparable to a natural disaster in the eyes of the locals. The ancient Raoul yelled at them and asked them to stop. Thea did not seem to hear him. She slapped the ground with both hands, and a thick mud dragon drilled out from the ground. Then, several ice attacks and an ice storm smashed towards Raoul. This Raoul was several times weaker than when he was on Earth. Across the river of time, his ability to share life force was basically useless. Now, he was squandering the power of faith. From infinite HP to a normal level, Thea was ready to take him down in this time and space. She used a large amount of magic to attack while sealing the space. No matter what, she could not let him escape. Raoul did not retreat. His divine power was mixed with his 250,000 years of persistence. He felt that he was not wrong, and Thea had been obstructing him time and time again. She must be an evil enemy. Is there anything wrong with being righteous? Am I wrong to help ordinary people? Facing the righteous Raoul, Thea was a little speechless. It was as if she was a demon king. Please. I am the righteous one, okay? Fighting while shouting that justice will prevail, it was a little shameful. In all honesty, she also did not feel that she could represent justice. Why are you shouting when you are fighting? You are really annoying. Sia flew into a rage out of humiliation. She quickly took out a golden dragon skin and used the dragon skin as the drawing paper and the blood of the hell demons as the paint. She communicated with the divine power of art and quickly drew a picture on the dragon skin with just a few strokes. In the picture was a barren world with no civilization and no life. Get in here. Thea controlled the mud dragon and threw out 2 black chains of death aura. She wrapped Raoul and rushed into the world in the picture. Raoul's weak divine power was undoubtedly exposed. He did not notice anything unusual and still wanted to break free from the dragon. Haha. Seeing that everything was as expected, Thea couldn't help but laugh out loud. This was the insight she had gained from studying the stranger's silver coin and the shadow of the first. He was still far from being able to create a parallel universe. However, with the help of top-grade materials, it was sufficient to create a 2-dimensional small world. In the 2-dimensional world, The real Raoul had become a little man with lines, and she could add lightning and volcanoes to the drawing paper at will. She could draw a mountain with a wave of her hand, and a large river with a wave of her brush. The sense of accomplishment of having everything under control was simply overwhelming. Unaware of the situation, Raoul fought with all his might and knocked away the mud dragon. Before he could catch his breath, Thea drew 3 more opponents for him. There was a cactus that was taller than a mountain, a giant squid that drilled out of the river, and an eagle that flew from far away in the sky. During the battle, he would draw a few meteorites on Raoul's head from time to time, or create a hurricane. Looking at Rao's puzzled face, she almost laughed out loud. This kind of two-dimensional world couldn't trap a real god. However, Raoul was a different story. His strength was regressing every minute and every second. It was unknown whether he would be able to come out in the end. A real life. Thea took a few glances and discovered the mystery within. The eagle and squid she drew didn't have any life, but Raoul did. He could even be said to be an aggregate of life. As more and more of his divine power was poured into the two-dimensional world, this thing that he casually created actually had a hint of color. She had never spent much effort on life. This wasn't to say that it wasn't important, but it was a matter of order. She had the white lamp, and life was her friend. Peeking at life from the side of death, she also had a high level of life. Now that Raoul had entered the two-dimensional world, the things he injected into the world seemed real yet not real, like an illusion yet not an illusion. She originally wanted to kill Raoul, but now she changed her mind and prepared to observe more. At the same time, she added countless rare materials into the drawing to strengthen this world. Ouch! Just as she was admiring Raoul beating up the little monsters, she suddenly felt a violent backlash from her divine power. The sudden attack almost made her vomit blood. She forced herself to endure it and looked into the drawing. Raoul's body shattered into pieces like a piece of glass. What happened? There were no enemies around. She suddenly realized something. She immediately turned around and looked at Batman. She saw the ancient Raoul lying on the ground with a smile on his face. He was already dead. Damn. Thea felt that she almost sprained her waist. This guy was actually dead. You guys. She questioned Batman angrily. Sister Thea, he committed suicide. He didn't want to become like the future. We couldn't stop him. Kara explained with red eyes. He was a respectable person. He turned off the life absorption device. His life had actually come to an end. In order to help us, he gave up everything, Batman said emotionally. From their point of view, Thea was so agitated because a good person had died. They understood and were also upset that they didn't keep an eye on Raoul. In the end, this tragedy happened right under their noses. The two of them also tried to persuade her. Young mistress wanted to cry but had no tears. However, if Raoul wanted to die, they really couldn't stop him. However, this guy lived when he should have died and died when he should have lived. Young mistress suspected that the will of the world was against her. I have already trapped that Raoul. He really didn't need to, sigh. She shook her head and sighed. This guy's life force was exhausted and he died. With her methods, she could save him with some effort. However, the one in the two-dimensional world was definitely dead. That was a time error. No matter how powerful the resurrection spell was, it wouldn't affect him. Maybe this would work too. She glanced at the drawing. A large amount of life force had descended into this small world. Moreover, because Raoul was a time error, his death also brought time to the two-dimensional world. She had created such a thing by chance. She was also quite helpless. She put away the drawing and prepared to study it later. According to Raoul's instructions before his death, she destroyed the 12 white jade pillars used to absorb life force. After that, she pulled Batman and Kara and ran away. With a bunch of primitive Kryptonians sending them off with javelins and stone arrows, they ran back to the 21st century. Although Raoul was dead, the battle on Earth was still not over. Nightwing launched a recovery potion after Batman left. The people on Earth returned to normal and the politicians of various countries heaved a sigh of relief. However, the number of aliens in Raoul's battleship was still huge. Superman, Diana, and all the other superheroes cooperated with the government army. Thea, Batman, and Supergirl also joined the battle later. After fighting for 3 days, all the alien fanatics of the Raoul Church were driven away. She slowly lowered the acceleration barrier on Earth and returned it to normal levels. The war caused by good intentions finally came to an end. Chapter 879. With Raoul's death, the time loophole was finally repaired. In this timeline solidified by Thea, there would no longer be any strange enemies. After seeking the opinion of Superman and Supergirl, Big Cousin Shea was sealed on that nameless planet. But the trouble caused by them could be said to have just begun. One world, one dream's impact on the original order of Earth was placed in front of everyone after Raoul's death and the aliens' defeat. More than 70 countries were dissolved by Raoul. What would happen to these countries? Would they bring back the officials to lead the ordinary people? No one wanted to have a bunch of organizations above them to manage them. It would be fine if they existed forever, but the ordinary people were free for a few days and they wanted to continue to be free. The economic losses were even more incalculable. Raoul believed that everyone was his children, so naturally, they should enjoy the same rights. The doctrine of this Kryptonian god was about equal distribution and believed that resources should belong to everyone. That was what he said and what he did. The economies of various financial groups in various countries suffered a near-devastating blow. The high-tech laboratories under Thea's name, the arsenal, the airline, the ship, and the pharmaceutical companies were all severely impacted. No financial groups in the world escaped. A bunch of rich heroes such as Batman and the Atom Man all suffered the same fate. All kinds of high-tech equipment were lost to the ordinary people. Thea's side was still fine. The bell of death jumped out at the critical moment and killed Raoul's believers who were ready to take advantage of the equal distribution. Not much high-tech equipment was lost. Wayne Group and Palmer Group were lost. Many equipment went to the ordinary people, which also gave them the confidence to fight against the government. Even if he wanted to reorganize the company, he couldn't do it because many of the key people had disappeared. The report given to her by the secretary showed that the actual loss of property under her name was more than 15 billion. If the reclusive families took over the remote control companies after they withdrew, it would be more than 100 billion. This was all business, not the valuation of the stock market. Also, because the global economy took a big step backward, the loss of wealth and divine power, she hated Raoul to the core. If he was dead, she would have dragged him out and beaten him up. The global economy has been hit hard. The stock market continues to be delayed. The Federal Reserve calls on everyone to make rational judgments. All kinds of experts and professors spoke on the media, persuading the ordinary people to continue with their original lives. But how was that possible? The money from the government and the consortiums had been distributed to the citizens. If it was just one or two of them, it would still be fine. But Rao was not selfish at all. He had split the money equally. The citizens did not want to give up on the benefits that they had obtained. The government was extremely short of resources, and the conflict between the two sides could not be reconciled. No matter how powerful Thea was, no matter how good her death knell swordsmanship was, there were many technological devices that could never be recovered. If an ordinary person were to get their hands on them, they would be chopped into 8 pieces and given a new coat of paint. How would they be able to prove that it was yours? In short, it was a mess. Metropolis, Hall of Justice. Batman called everyone for a meeting. It wasn't time for the meeting yet. In the past, this was the time to chat, but today, everyone was very busy. Everyone had an official identity, and no one had jumped out from the cracks of a rock. Raoul's influence was in all aspects. For example, an ordinary person like Kyle Rayner was on the phone at this time. His father's car had been divided and was now being coordinated with the insurance company. In the end, Nightwing had joined the alliance. His public identity was that of a police officer from Broodhaven. Now, he was sprawled on the table, studying the files from the past few days. Like a spring, he had been suppressed to the extreme by Raoul. When this pressure disappeared, a large number of criminal activities erupted, and he could not take it anymore. Of course, the busiest was Thea. This was her territory, and all kinds of lines were there. At the same time, she had to hold 3 video conferences to clean up the mess everywhere. Diana was also answering the phone for her. She had been working for 3 consecutive days. Other than when she had first taken over the company, she had never been so busy before. On the other side, the Flash was also writing a crime scene investigation report. He used superspeed, and in a short while, the report piled up 1/2 meter high. Bro Superman was also holding a laptop and writing his own news report. When Batman entered the room, he saw that everyone in the room was busy, but he couldn't say anything because he had just finished his work. He coughed lightly. As the convener of this meeting, he was the first to speak. Raoul is not a bad person. In the Justice League Hall, Batman recounted his experiences on ancient Krypton and talked about the current topic. Raoul was dead, but he had left a lot of things on Earth. These things would not disappear because of his death. The Sahara Desert and several other deserts around the world had become fertile land. The ice in Greenland and Siberia had thawed, and the African warlords had fallen. The forbidden zone of human life was showing signs of becoming a paradise. Following that, there were a lot of social and natural problems, such as rising sea levels, sudden changes in the water cycle and ocean currents, climate change, population migration, and overcrowding at the borders of various countries. The political leaders pinched their noses to solve these social problems, and the natural problems were left to the Justice League. Can the status quo in those places be maintained? It's a good thing that the living space of human beings has been expanded, Batman asked Thea. What do you want me to do? I can't do anything about it. No one cares about Siberia or Greenland, so it will naturally become cold. This is a problem of the cold air, not a problem of magic. Thea immediately retorted. Zatanna, who had now joined the Justice League, also expressed her support. It's the same for the Sahara Desert. It's been like this since 3000 AD. Planting more trees to solve the problem of desertification is the right thing to do. Raoul did turn sand into land, but as time passed, the divine power disappeared, and the original state was the same. This is a matter of science, not magic. Thea continued. She did not reject it directly. She quickly ordered her subordinates to send out drones from Cairo to investigate the Sahara Desert. The images were quickly sent back to the Justice League headquarters, and the heroes watched it. Raoul did a good job. Under his call, the Sahara Desert became fertile land. Many Africans left their homeland and went to this fertile land to start a new life. Many people in the countries around the desert tried to escape the war and migrated in this direction. The roads were crowded with pedestrians. They carried all their belongings and went to the paradise in their hearts. How long can Raoul's magic last? Superman asked. His feelings for Rao were extremely complicated. His respect for him was still there. To a certain extent, Rao's ideals were his ideals. However, he was very disgusted by the idea of depriving ordinary people of their wishes. Chapter 880. About 10 to 15 years later. Look at these coordinates, the land has actually turned into sand again. This is a sign of the rapid decline of divine power. She pointed at a few points and explained to everyone. Can we maintain contact with the green of all things? Batman asked again. It's possible, but the green of all things has its own balance with the red of all things and the black of decay. It even has its own internal balance. If the vegetation in the Sahara increases, it may affect the tropical rainforest in South America. It's best to use it carefully. Although they rejected magic methods, maintaining the status quo and giving ordinary people more space to live was still something that the heroes agreed with. They couldn't say that Raoul came with green mountains and clear waters. They could kill him in the name of freedom and democracy, and then let ordinary people starve. They had to be stronger than Raoul, or the superheroes would lose face. A few technological heroes prepared to form a group to observe the scene. Thea wasn't let off by Batman either. The reason was that she had a lot of advanced technology. The environmental issue could only be said to be an appetizer. It was to prepare for the next topic. The Justice League suffered a huge negative impact because of Superman's actions. Even if ordinary people made a lot of money, they still targeted Superman. It was he who called on everyone to believe in Raoul, which led to a series of subsequent disasters. The government's accusations, the people's complaints, and so on. Supergirl had been hit so hard that she hid at home and didn't dare to go out. Fortunately, her reputation was low and her appeal was small. Superman was completely different. He was a landmark superhero. He was now under huge moral pressure and could only rely on a lot of work to numb himself. Of course, the Justice League couldn't push Superman out and cut him down. The only choice was to bear this negative reputation together. It had to be mentioned that Missy also had a lot of negative information. The black snow in the metropolis scared many people to the point of peeing their pants. Thea suspected that it was because of the cold. In addition, she killed many people when she equalized the Quinn Group's assets, which caused a lot of criticism. However, she was thick-skinned. With Superman in front of her and a large number of media outlets to wash the ground, she watched them discuss as if nothing had happened. Shua. Shua with all your might. Shua with all your might. That was the general flow that everyone had in mind. If their reputation dropped, they would just have to raise it again. In addition, Raoul was really a good person this time. Even ordinary people benefited from it. As long as Superman said that he was also deceived, he would naturally gain sympathy. Thea also helped him arrange several live TV events and online broadcasts. She also had the intelligence network of the Righteous Alliance. The target of the attack was global, and it would be back in a few days. In the end, the Sea King brought up an issue. He needed the support of the main alliance. Arthur, is Atlantis in such dire straits? Thea put down the video conference and asked seriously. The ocean occupied 70% of the Earth's total area and nothing could happen to it. The Sea King heaved a long sigh at the mention of this vexing matter. He didn't try to hide his family's predicament, so he recounted the entire situation. The land was in chaos, and the sea was even more chaotic. Even the authority of Queen Atlana could not withstand it. Poseidon died in battle, and the priests, who had always maintained a close relationship with the royal family, were directly suppressed. The Council of Elders rose in power. They joined forces with Raoul's priest and the Sea King's brother, Amu. The three forces united, and the royal family lost control of Atlantis. It had to be said that Poseidon's death in battle put a huge psychological pressure on the Atlanteans. Even if everything had returned to normal, they still chose to believe in Raoul's priest, even if this god had killed the god they had worshipped for countless years. The strong were respected, and this point of view was even more obvious in the sea. The heroes looked at each other, and they were all in a dilemma. There were too few superheroes who were good at water battles. In comics and movies, heroes could fight for a few rounds, but that was not the case. It was pitch black underwater, and without supervision, there was no way they could fight. They would be killed in minutes. People like the Flash, Batman, and the Atom Man would basically die in the water. Oxygen, vision, pressure, there were too many things to consider. I can mobilize some troops from the military to participate in the battle as allies, but the Righteous Alliance. Thea looked at the heroes in the room. I can help. Brother Superman was the first to respond, followed by Green Lantern Kyle Rayner. He also said that space battles and underwater battles would not affect the Green Lantern. In the end, Thea persuaded Superman. He could fight underwater, but he could only use 30% of his combat power. It was better for him to slowly gain reputation on land. With Green Lantern Kyle and a few Yellow Lanterns and Green Lanterns, they could handle most battles. After all, Atlantis was not a matter of battle, but of politics. In the end, Thea spent some time to borrow the Sea King's trident from Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. This was more authoritative than the Neptune's trident, which was passed down in their family. It should be able to help the Sea King gain the support of his people. Late at night, Thea finished her work. Seeing that Diana seemed to have something to say, she asked, "What's wrong?" "Ours is dead." Thea did not know what to say. Was he unlucky? Raoul eliminated the war and directly killed Ars, who was on the verge of death. This god that Diana had heard of for thousands of years was finally dead. Even if he could be resurrected, it would be a matter of hundreds of years later. It was also hard to say if the resurrected Ars would still be the same. She hugged Diana's shoulder and patted her arm to comfort her. Diana only mentioned Ars lightly and quickly moved on. What do you think is the problem with Raoul's approach? Raoul's problem is that he is too idealistic. Everyone and everything is bathed in the sunlight. This basically erases the spirituality of intelligent life. Everyone has their own secrets and desires that no one knows about. If all of these are discussed under the sun, it would be too scary. The Raoul from 250,000 years ago saw it very clearly. Unfortunately, he lost himself after that. Thea could not help but sigh. Diana turned sideways and sat on her with her legs spread apart. 2 white calves were exposed under her pajamas. The Valkyrie looked straight into her eyes. What about you? Will you lose yourself? The princess smiled lightly. How is that possible? My realm is much higher than Raoul's. You, on the other hand. She sized up Diana. The god of Valor was filled with divine power when she fused with the Ion Shark. Thea's realm was much higher, but their actual combat power was about the same. As the god of Valor, she could easily control her emotions. Not only that, Diana had worn the purple lamp ring. As a god, her love was unparalleled. In Thea's eyes, Diana's control of love had also reached a small level. Chapter 881. Thea had anger, fear, hope, pity, and greed. On the other hand, Diana had courage and love. They complemented each other perfectly. In order to completely control the white lamp, I also want to learn how to control love. Thea bit Diana's ear softly. Her voice was extremely soft. The god of courage said, "Bring it on. You can't be called a man if you frown." The learning process was extremely painful. In order for her to master it as soon as possible, Diana used all her strength. Love was closely related to courage. Now that the two were combined, together with powerful strength, Thea begged for mercy and said that she would learn again next time. To be fair, the young lady was talented in learning, but it was hard to say when mixed with other things. After a night of learning, it could be said that there was no progress in courage or love. She couldn't be like Diana, who swung her sword without caring about anything and loved without caring about anything. She had too many thoughts and concerns. This was a result of her nature. Of course, there was also good news. As someone who had mastered 4.5 emotions, she had the courage to passively accept love. This was because emotions had a certain absorption and transformation effect. Overall, it was effective. Although the speed was slow, she should be able to master these 2 emotions after a long time. Of course, the prerequisite was that she had to be passive. For the white lamp, for the life of the universe, I'll let you do it for a few days. She made a bold declaration, which made Diana roll her eyes. In the end, she was lectured again. The two's learning didn't affect their work at all. The next day, they put on thick coats and went to Star City. At the archery club, they had to study how to maintain the topography of the few polar regions. "Hi, I'm Thea Quinn. This is Diana, my girlfriend." The young lady shook hands with a black man in a very stylish manner. The black man had an expression of sudden realization. Then, he smiled a little exaggeratedly. Curtis Hort, codename Mr. Excellent. Mr. Excellent was Green Arrow's most recent helper. His wife was pregnant, his good brother had gone to Gotham, and his disciple had been dragged to the Young Titans. Oliver was a general without an army. Coincidentally, crime was on the rise in Star City recently. He and the young Mr. Excellent liked each other, so they formed a team to maintain law and order. The black man looked a little funny, but he was actually a very intelligent person. It was hard to tell whether the smartest person on Earth was Batman or Luther, but there was no doubt that the third was Mr. Excellent. He had started reading the works of Einstein and Fermat at the age of 6. He knew many languages and had a doctorate in 14 different fields. Hulk's neighbor, Banner, was also a top student, but Banner only had 7 doctorates. From this, it could be seen that Mr. Excellent was a great person. He was worthy of being called the pinnacle of wisdom among mortals. After a brief chat, Batman and the Atom Man arrived one after another. Batman had really taken the time out of his busy schedule to come over. Without Raoul as a target, the Joker's gaze once again found him. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle in Gotham. Everyone sat down, and the Environmental Protection Team was officially established. The topic was also very simple. They had to do their best to preserve Raoul's miracle. Greenland, which was relatively easier, was given to Green Arrow and Mr. Excellent. East Siberia was given to Batman and the Atom Man. As for the deserts on Earth, the two goddesses would be responsible for that. The Sahara Desert, the Libyan Desert, and all the way to the Taklamakan Desert. Our mission is too difficult. It's almost 18 million square kilometers. Diana frowned as she looked at it. Sia immediately said that it was too much. Sorry, only you are suitable. The management of the desert should be the same, not to mention that there are countless civilians there now. Batman hinted that this was not just an environmental problem, but also a political problem. Which country did those people belong to? The desert had become fertile land. Now, who owned the land? It added up to 18 million square kilometers. Now that the countries were busy with internal affairs, they did not have time to care about this. When they were done and looked over, they would find a huge piece of meat here. It would be strange if they were not jealous. The heroes needed to unify their opinions, the major countries needed to coordinate, and the small countries could not ignore them. If they were to cause any damage, it would be a disaster. No one knew what Raoul was thinking. The nuclear bombs were also evenly in the hands of the small countries. There were 15,000 nuclear warheads in the world, and now there were 5,000 in the small countries and some organizations. When Thea first heard the news, she was shocked. She quickly told Superman not to earn reputation, but to get the nuclear bombs back first. Superman did not say anything. He called the Martian hunter and Supergirl who was eating donuts at home. The three of them were very busy. Stealing and robbing, and with the information provided by many agents, they only managed to get back about 4,000 bombs. If they were not satisfied with the distribution rules, it was hard to guarantee that the small countries and organizations would not take the risk. Thea reluctantly accepted the mission. At least let's go and take a look. Brother Aziz, do you see the campsite in front? You can go to the oasis from there. Look. A man with a cunning expression gestured to the old man beside him that they had reached the place and it was time to pay. The old man's face was weathered, and there was an obvious knife wound on his forehead. He did not wear a traditional robe. Instead, he carried a thick bag on his back and wore a pair of tattered sandals. One of his feet was red, and the other was black. One would not think of fashion when looking at this pair of shoes, because it was obvious that the old man had picked them up on the road. The old man nodded and bowed, hurriedly saying thank you for a long time. Then, he carefully took out a roll of US dollars from his backpack and handed it to the man who was leading the way. Dad, will they take us in? The boy looked at the campsite in the distance. Many guards were holding weapons and guarding the passage. The boy had seen some of the weapons before, and some of them were so high-tech that he had never even thought of them. The boy saw with his own eyes two cars that tried to break through the checkpoint. They were shot into powder by a huge silver gun in the hands of a guard. There was no blood, no explosion, but it was unimaginably terrifying. There was a glimmer of hope in the old man's eyes. Thank God. If we go there, we can start a new life. The boy's voice was very soft as he muttered, "It's obviously Raoul." The father and son happily paid the toll. The burly man who blocked the way searched them and did not find anything rare. He immediately gestured with his mouth to signal them to leave. The father and son's encounter was just a microcosm. Thea and Diana had already seen more than 10 sentries blocking the way as they flew over. They were not subordinate to each other. Relying on their strong bodies and the advanced weapons in their hands, they collected the money and goods of these poor people along the way. Like vampires, they took away the last bit of savings of these poor people. Damn it! Diana pulled out her sword again. The blade was still stained with blood. Let me do it, the young lady said calmly. She raised her hand and cast an area petrification spell, turning all the burly men in the campsite into stone. Chapter 882. Raoul's oasis gave the poor people hope. The temperature was moderate and the resources were abundant. As long as they were willing to work hard, they would reap the rewards. In addition, there was no exploitation. It was a paradise for the poor. Ordinary people who could no longer live in the countries at the edge of the Sahara Desert rushed here to start a new life. Unfortunately, they were too naive. The rate at which evil grew was far beyond their imagination. Many people who came first saw the benefits and changed their roles. They led the way, set up checkpoints, collected fees, screened, killed, and buried the bodies. It was a one-stop service. Those with benefits would be kept, and those without benefits would be released. The two goddesses walked by and killed more people than they could kill. They could control the heavens and the earth, but they could not control the hearts of people. Perhaps Raoul did not intend to take away the freedom of intelligent life in the beginning. Thea sighed. Other than mental control and brainwashing, she really did not know of any better way to let ordinary people benefit instead of being exploited. No matter how beautiful the wish was, it would become unrecognizable in the end. The two of them flew around the original desert and now the paradise. In just a few days, people with motorized vehicles had already entered the depths of the oasis. They looked more like opportunists than survivors. The father and son from before could only rely on their own 2 feet to move forward. These people are so unscrupulous. Diana looked at a convoy of cars, driving hundreds of ordinary people away like slaves. Dozens of fully armed men were laughing loudly with weapons in their hands. The dust raised by the vehicles was like an earth dragon. The only difference between suffering and happiness was whether or not they had weapons in their hands. Anarchism. Those who have weapons in their hands will naturally put themselves in the position of the leader. Then, they will gather the refugees, expand their own team, build a camp, and then fight with other camps to determine the final victor, Thea talked to herself. The two women's faces were not looking good. Then what should we do? Just wait. Diana had been in human society for 100 years and had studied many political systems. Although they were all theories on paper, she still had some basic knowledge. Thea wanted to say to defeat the evil people and give the good people weapons to maintain order. However, when she thought of human nature, she hesitated. Once power was in hand, the good people would also become evil. They might even be worse than these people now. Let me think about it. Let's observe for a while longer. They looked at several desert areas and discussed countermeasures with Green Arrow, Batman, and the others. This problem existed in several places. In the beginning, establishing order required bloodshed. Later on, development required bloodshed. In the end, fighting against other countries required even more bloodshed. If he had the mindset that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, he could have directly dispersed Raoul's divine power and restored this place to its original state. This would have prevented many conflicts. But the heroes did not want to do it. Oliver and Diana were determined to persevere. The slightly lazy young mistress could only be forcefully pulled by the heroes to think of ideas. There was no doubt that Raoul had encountered these problems in the beginning. In the past 250,000 years, there were trillions of intelligent life forms. Not all of them were Kryptonians. In the beginning, Raoul might have thought of various ways to resist greed and reduce conflict, but all his efforts were in vain. In the end, he could only play the simple and crude game of changing a small part of the brain of an intelligent being, making them worship him and obey his orders. It was not convenient for Thea to do so, so she could only ponder on it. She deliberated her words. First of all, we can't appear directly. If it has to be a superhero, Mr. Excellent can do it. Just like the previous nuclear bomb fight, it was not suitable for the president's son, daughter, or daughter's friend to appear. Their identities were sensitive and could easily lead to unnecessary interpretation. It was the same for the current political system. Batman was not suitable either. He was too busy and had too much prestige. Mr. Excellent was very suitable. He was not famous, smart, and black, me alone. The black man on the video link opened his mouth wide and was a little surprised. Thea wanted to say, yes, that's right. But she knew it was unrealistic. Let's talk to the young Titan and see if they can help. It should not be too sensitive for the half-grown children to do this. Their eyes lit up. This idea was very good. The young Titan was not a subordinate of the Alliance. They were an independent organization. The children had strong self-esteem and could not give orders. Thea and the others began to communicate. Batman looked for Tim, Diana looked for Casey, Thea looked for Raven, and Green Arrow looked for the armory. The negotiation process was very fast. The young Titan had nothing to do, and Tim attached great importance to this collective activity. The enemy was only a few militants, and their strength was extremely weak. However, this operation was very significant. It was estimated that tens of millions of refugees would enter this area in the 18 million square kilometers. This level of major event was very much in line with the children's values and a mission that could prove themselves. The chaos might be stopped for a while under the attack of a group of little heroes, but what about the political system? Anarchism? Or autonomy? Batman and Excellent, whose IQ was off the charts, could not think of a solution. Heroes were heroes, and politics was politics. She could only leave this problem to her mother. Moira was very busy at this time. Not only was she busy, but the leaders of the various countries were also busy. At this time, she could see the advantage of strengthening her mother's physique. The leaders of the various countries were exhausted. Only old comrade Moira was still in command, and she had taken the initiative. She did not care about the 18 million square kilometers. With the existence of extraterrestrial trade, the country did not lack resources. There was no need to occupy such a large area of land, arousing hostility from other countries, and destroying the internal balance. Moira wanted to be a good president. She did not intend to be a queen who opened up new territories. Use religion. Don't those people believe in Raoul? Use this as a banner to gather everyone's beliefs. Maybe it will work. Of course, the premise is that Raoul is dead. That guy is dead, right? He's dead. Don't worry. Thea reassured her mother. She had to admit that Moira had given her a good idea. There were pros and cons to raising Raoul's banner again. The pros were that the ordinary people had received his kindness. Although they were controlled and brainwashed, their memories were still there. No one could deny that Raoul had helped them, and the few priests were not greedy. The cons were that the major countries in the world and the countries around the desert were independent. However, they would definitely arouse the hostility of other countries. There was no difference whether their hatred was 500 or 1,000. If they were flexible, they might be able to take advantage of the disagreements between the countries and find a new path. Thea explained the method to them, but Batman was still worried. Is Raoul really not going to rise from the ashes? Or are you going to start a new religion? Chapter 883. I don't have the time to write Raoul's Bible, but there are many Raoul priests in Atlantis. Maybe I can pull them over. Anyway, this is Raoul's land of miracles. It's only natural for them to spread their religion. At the same time, they can solve the Sea King's problem. It had to be said that this was killing many birds with one stone. Thea and Diana immediately rushed to Atlantis. She wanted to persuade the priests to spread their religion on land. San Francisco, T Building. This was the headquarters of the Young Titans. Nightwing and Princess Spark were both adults. They each had their own jobs and were very busy recently. The arms dealer, Curoy Harper, was originally Spacetime Thea's lover. Now, he had met the second-generation Robin, Red Hood Jason Todd. The two of them were very close. Regardless of whether it was because of his ideals or something else, he did not respond to the young Titan's summons. Martian Maiden, Martian Hunter, Superman, and Supergirl were searching for nuclear bombs all over the world. They did not have the time either. Other than the four of them, Red Robin, Wonder Girl, Raven, Pulse, Animal Boy, and Blue Beetle were all present. Perhaps because Gotham was too dangerous, Batman was afraid that the Joker would attack his son when he was not home. Therefore, he sent Damien over as well. Of course, he was there to help. Damien also called his good friend, Jonathan Kent Jr., who was watching television at home. 8 half-grown children gathered together to prepare for their first group mission. The adult heroes had thought it through well. Mr. Excellent would lead them to eliminate evil and bring peace to the people. It was a pity that the adults had underestimated the children's competitiveness. Mr. Excellent. Where did this black uncle come from? Holding 2 shining silver light balls in his hands. Let him play with his eggs. Mr. Excellent, whose IQ was off the charts, did not want to offend them either. Look at this group of people. They were Superman's son, Batman's son, Thea's disciple, Diana's disciple, and the Flash's grandson. These young masters and young ladies were all descendants of famous families. It was not a matter of principle. Of course, he would not be the bad guy. He happily expressed that he would help. Red Robin Tim said a few polite words about contacting them again when he was free. Then, he hung up the call. Everyone, where do you think we should go first? They were all capable people, but considering that it was their first group activity, he decided to stick together. Greenland was the first to be eliminated. Mr. Excellent was there. He had just rejected the other party, and now he appeared in front of the other party half an hour later. Even a few half-grown children wouldn't be so shameless. East Siberia was also ruled out because Batman was there. In the end, they agreed to go to the Sahara Desert first. As one of Batman's direct subordinates, Tim had no lack of fighter jets. Other than Pulse Bart Allen, who could only run, everyone else could fly. Even Damien had the great Leonopteryx that Thea had given him. However, in order to keep a low profile, they all chose to sit in the plane. The few of them gathered in 2s and 3s to chat. Raven and Damien had known each other for many years. Although their master was not very reliable, and most of the time they were self-taught, over time, they had developed some feelings for each other. The 2 of them were chatting with each other with a special tacit understanding. Little Jonathan and Animal Boy, who had turned into a gorilla, were arm wrestling. Pulse was studying the Blue Beetle's armor. On the other hand, Wonder Girl, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, was chatting with Tim. Looking at the vast expanse of greenery on the land, she couldn't help but exclaim, "This place has changed a lot." That's right. Sahara means Great Desert in Arabic. In the Bible, this is hell. In the ancient Mesopotamia. Tim blabbered on, and Wonder Girl Casey rolled her eyes. The 2 of them were about the same age, 3 or 4 years older than the group of children behind them. They had more in common and even had a good impression of each other. Casey only hoped that the process of courtship would be more romantic. However, Tim was inexperienced and couldn't wait to tell her everything he knew. His outward appearance was that he used too much force, which often made Casey not know how to respond. She could only laugh and change the topic. The 8 young people walked and stopped as if they were on a spring outing. These militants were at most ordinary people who had picked up weapons. They weren't even soldiers, so how could they be a match for them? They destroyed 3 camps easily and liberated hundreds of refugees. Just when the few of them felt that the mission was not challenging, an old man inadvertently told them a strange piece of news. Devil. There have always been signs of devil activity in the depths of the Sahara Desert. Tim repeated this sentence in a low voice. He first looked at Damien. This cheap brother of his was a member of the magic world after all. Damien shook his head, indicating that he didn't feel any magic. Tim then looked at Casey. Wonder Girl carefully analyzed, frowned and looked at Raven, shaking her head. Her armor of silence was made to defeat the 3 palace demon. The armor hated Raven's aura. Even though she knew that the 2 teachers were unusually close, Wonder Girl still had an extremely cold relationship with Raven. The Great Demon King's princess secretly criticized Casey and also shook her head. There were no signs of devil activity here at all. That old man must have drunk too much. Tim, who was proficient in psychology, micro-expressions, and the art of language, conversed with the old man again and asked a few locals. Interesting. The locals here all say that before Raoul, there were legends of demons in the valley in the northwest. According to the legends, demons can suck human blood, but they never go out of their territory. Tim touched his chin and shared the news he had heard with his friends. The few of them looked at each other. There was no fear in their eyes. They all had an expression that said, this seems interesting. When did the legends first start? Damien continued to ask methodically. 300 years ago, but in the recent 50 years, a group of strangers would come here every few years. The eyes of young Titan and the others lit up. They all looked like they didn't mind if things got out of hand. Someone had built a secret base in the desert and seemed to have carried out some inhumane experiments. This conclusion was not difficult to deduce. Tim looked at the eyes of his friends and quickly finalized a plan. First, they would go and see what secrets there were. Then, depending on the severity of the situation, they would choose to beat them up or cripple them. This secret valley was not far from them, less than 50 miles away. The few of them displayed their various abilities. Some flew, some ran, and some teleported. They all stopped at the outermost periphery. There were no devils in the valley at all. There were only tents everywhere. According to the number of tents, there should be no less than 500 people. Similarly, there were refugees everywhere and dozens of gunmen. It was no different from the thugs' camp that young Titan had dealt with before. There are no infrared rays, no drones, and no satellites above our heads. Tim quickly checked again. Chapter 884. After all, they were all descendants of famous families, so they did not rush over recklessly. Little Jonathan's supervision was sometimes ineffective, so Tim had no choice but to send Animal Boy to transform into an eagle and investigate. Very normal, refugees, armed with guns. They're no different from the enemies we've dealt with before. Animal Boy scouted around and quickly flew back to report. Tim hesitated for a moment before deciding to attack. Even if there was trouble, he felt that his team was enough to deal with it. He made a gesture and charged forward. He knocked down a burly man with an elbow. On the other side, Casey, Bart Allen, and the rest attacked one after another. The resistance of the camp was extremely weak. Tim analyzed the strength of the enemy as he fought. He felt that there was something wrong, but it was not fake that the enemy was defeated so easily. He could only think that he was being overly cautious. A very weak enemy. The legends are most likely fake. Damien knocked down the last burly man, and the refugees knelt on the ground. He did not like the atmosphere here, so he suggested that they continue walking. The few young heroes did not like being bowed to either, so they avoided him. At this moment, Tim saw a middle-aged woman in the crowd looking at him with a faint smile. She had triangular eyes, high cheekbones, and very tight skin on her face. She was completely different from the locals. He was just about to shout that there was something wrong here when he saw the middle-aged woman put on a mask and throw out a smoke bomb. As she exploded, another 4 people stood up in the crowd. They also put on masks and raised their arms. The smoke was as light as a veil, and there seemed to be countless whales within it. It was ethereal and fatal. Tim was just about to shout for the poisonous smoke when he realized that his tenacious will had been destroyed in an instant. He fell to the ground in a daze. The last thought he had before he fainted was, "What kind of smoke is this? It has such a strong effect." As he fell to the ground, the young Titans and the ordinary people in the camp also fell to the ground. Case's body flashed with a red light, but he fell to the ground in less than 2 seconds. The only exceptions were Damien and Raven. Their super long-distance teleportation gems were triggered, and they disappeared into the horizon at the same time. The middle-aged woman did not have any means to chase after them. She could only clench her fists in hatred. The poisonous smoke did not recognize her. She would fall if she took off her mask. After waiting for a while, she opened the mechanism on the other side, revealing a winding passage that led downwards. He called out to his subordinates, and they carried the few young Titans to the underground. "Young Master Damien! Master Damien, wake up!" Damien heard the old butler Foo's voice while he was unconscious. He didn't know how long it took for him to open his eyes. Did he return to the Batcave? The familiar surroundings seemed to be telling him that the previous scene was a dream. He tried his best to control his thoughts and pull his attention back to the present. Finally, he managed to suppress the discomfort. They had been plotted against. Perhaps the old man who told them about the demon was part of the conspiracy. How despicable. Damien gritted his teeth and touched his neck. The teleportation gem had turned into powder. He finally understood the reason. "How long have I been back?" Damien asked the old butler. 13 minutes. "Your teleportation spell was blocked outside the cave. I carried you in. Should I inform Master?" "Don't. I'll take care of it myself." Damien refused without even thinking about it. Summoning his own father when he couldn't beat him? He would rather die than do such a thing. Raven. Thinking that he could teleport, the big lowly was most likely teleported away as well. He hurriedly used the equipment in the bat cave to contact Raven. As expected, she had also escaped. Raven's magic resistance was much higher than his. Even though Damien was injected with a bunch of antidotes by the old butler, he was still a little dazed. Raven, on the other hand, was fine. However, the Demon King's princess was furious. She could tolerate the stranger's plot. After all, she couldn't beat him. But those people were nothing. They were just a few ordinary people. If Damien didn't contact her, she would kill her way back. "Wait a moment. Come and get me. We'll go together," Damien said through gritted teeth. He turned off the anti-teleportation device in the bat cave. Raven rushed over quickly and brought him to the Sahara Desert again. The old butler looked at the two young people running away in a hurry. It was as if he was looking at his own children and grandchildren. He was satisfied, happy, and so on. As for letting Raven see the layout of the bat cave, he didn't care. The young man and woman returned to the previous campsite. There was still a faint smoke at the scene. They didn't dare to act rashly. "What kind of smoke is this? Can you analyze it?" Raven asked. In her impression, Damien was just like his father, blindly researching when he had nothing to do. It turned out that Damien really did know. "Do you know the Sea of Souls that big sister Thea left in the New World? If I'm not wrong, the main ingredient here is that thing." "Ah, how did they get this thing?" "That place was already sealed by big sister Thea." Damien shrunk his neck and laughed dryly. "Maybe they stole it before. I heard that a few groups of people went to the scene before." He didn't have the face to say that his own father was the one who stole the most, and the most ruthless. Ending this awkward topic, the two walked deeper into the campsite. For mags, as long as they were prepared, nothing could stop them. As Thea's two disciples, they were very accomplished in dark magic. No matter how strong the smoke was, it was still dead, and people were alive. Seeing that no one was on guard, they used a wind spell to disperse the poisonous smoke and began to search the campsite. "It's here." Damien found the switch and opened a secret passage. Using an invisibility spell, they walked down. The passage was winding. In order to avoid the traps on the ground, the two turned into shadows and carefully floated down. As they continued to move forward, they saw the tip of the iceberg of this underground base. It covered a large area and extended in all directions. But whether it was the walls or the roads, they were a little old. Everything here was obviously unrelated to Raoul. There was no divine power or magic. It was completely man-made. It was just that they didn't know how much manpower it took to excavate such a huge underground building in the depths of the desert. "Stop." Damien waved his hand to signal for them to stop. He pointed at two guards who were patrolling in the distance. There were two bald men in white robes. Their shoulders and sleeves were blood red. They were carrying high-tech firearms and walking casually. "Who are they? They don't seem to be from the military. Take them down and ask." Raven was a little eager. Damien looked at them carefully and shook his head. "I recognize their clothes. They are blood brothers. They used to be a member of the Assassin League. But the leader was obsessed with finding forbidden items and was exiled by grandfather. I didn't expect that after 200 years, they are still alive." "Forbidden items?" "Yes, the Spear of Fate, the Shroud, Judas's Oath and something like that," Damien said casually. Chapter 885. Damien raised his wrist, and a few red dots flashed on his watch. Similar to his father's habit, he had placed a locator on every member. He compared the terrain and studied it. Red Robin and the rest are inside. Let's go around the guards. The two of them used the shadows as cover and quickly walked in. There were not many guards patrolling along the way. Damien did not know that the middle-aged woman was afraid of being punished by the leader and hid the important information that two of them had escaped. Brothers and sisters, I have to emphasize that the so-called gods are just superheroes. In this world, only I am God. After turning two corners, a very provocative voice sounded in the underground building with the help of a loudspeaker. Immediately after, there were countless fanatical shouts. Long live the Blood Brothers! Long live the Blood Brothers! Damien and Raven went around the guards and lifted a thick curtain. Looking at the huge space in front of them, they knew that they had found their target. There was a square that could accommodate thousands of people. In the center of the square, there was a tall platform. A burly man with strong Central Asian characteristics raised his hands and encouraged the crowd. Below the platform, hundreds of fanatical believers raised their arms like madmen and cheered for their leader. They were the same as the previous guards. Regardless of gender, they all had shaved heads and wore white robes. They looked like soldiers who were going to participate in a holy war. A few pictures appeared on the screen behind the leader. There were pictures of the recent RAO, Superman, and Thea. RAO is not God, and neither are those superheroes. I am your only God. The people below were even more excited. Their voices were so loud that it seemed like they were going to overturn the soil above their heads. Everyone seemed to be able to see the day when their leader became a god and led them out of this hole. God. God. Damien and Raven frowned as they listened to the fanatical shouts. Although they weren't afraid of killing people, there were quite a lot of people present. The two of them didn't want to turn the first group activity of the young Titans into a massacre. They quickly reached a consensus to save their companions first. Who are you people? Enemies. Unfortunately, they were discovered before they could do anything. They were not afraid at all. Damien unsheathed his long sword. Magic surged and turned into a shadow. Raven's hands flashed with dark magic. The two of them rushed toward the tall and sturdy man on the platform. As long as they could take him down, the battle would be over. The fanaticism of the believers brought them a lot of trouble, and they were stopped before they could charge 10 meters forward. This was the League of Assassins. There were also magic suppression devices here, but the effect was not very strong. Damien had no choice but to reduce his magic power consumption and only use his martial arts to kill his enemies after killing more than 10 enemies in a row and blocking several of his attacks. Raven, on the other hand, had not yet recovered to her peak state because she had mobilized her bloodline power during the Dark Night. She could only use spells like shadow bullets and shadow arrows to kill her enemies. It had to be said that their attacks were quite sharp, and the disciples' counterattacks were also quite impressive. Countless high-tech devices were scattered among the people, and an organization like the Blood Brothers naturally seized the opportunity to seize many things. Quantized cages, atomized rays, and all kinds of strange weapons were taken out. The two young men were a little flustered for a moment. Quick, activate it. Why are you in a daze? The leader ordered the middle-aged woman beside him. The middle-aged woman was now wearing a priest's robe, which was very different from the previous refugee's outfit. When she first saw Damien and Raven, she was very nervous. Not reporting it was a serious crime in the church. The key was that she was not alone in this ambush. There were a few people who knew about it, and they probably thought that she had reported it. She was not a fanatical believer, nor was she the leader waiting to become a god. To her, enjoying wealth was far better than becoming a god. As the leader's assistant, her first reaction was to hide it. Now that she could not hide it anymore, she thought of shirking the responsibility. The leader did not know what she was thinking. Seeing that she was still in a daze, and in these few seconds, Damien and Raven rushed a few more steps, he had to urge the middle-aged woman again. Although the middle-aged woman did not think much of becoming a god, she did not dare to resist the leader. After all, this guy bathed in human blood every day. It was said that he had lived for 200 years, and his deterrence was not ordinary. She focused her attention on her hand and quickly operated the control panel. Following her command, a huge machine rose from the bottom of the platform. The machine was more than 5 meters tall and 10 meters long. It had a sci-fi feel, and a young Titan was tied to each of its 5 mechanical arms. Apart from Tim, who was an ordinary person, little Jonathan, Bart Allen, Blue Beetle, Animal Boy, and Wonder Girl were all tied up. As the metal probes pierced into their bodies, a few types of energy of different attributes began to gather in the middle. Ha. The leader was like a madman. He sat in the middle of the machine and guided the energy of different attributes into his body. If Thea was here, she would definitely complain. Little Jonathan and Bart Allen were understandable. Kryptonians and the power of speed, and Animal Boy's superpower could also be considered a superpower. But Blue Beetle and Wonder Girl, one was an alien technology, and the other was an ancient armor. Was it really okay to just grab their eyebrows and noses? The leader of the Blood Brothers would answer her, yes, everything is possible. Ah. Ha-ua. The leader of the Blood Brothers roared as if he was constipated. Perhaps he shouted a little too loudly, or perhaps it was too painful to extract energy, but the children slowly woke up. Bastard. Wonder Girl also had a bit of Diana's temper. She gritted her teeth, blue veins popped out on her forehead, and her arms exerted the strength of 1,000 pounds to break free. On the other side, little Jonathan was also struggling hard. The middle-aged woman controlled the machine, and several powerful electric currents struck out. She wanted to knock them out. Once, they didn't faint. Again, they didn't faint. The power output was at the maximum, and the children resisted more and more strongly. Increase the extraction power, the leader roared at her. The middle-aged woman hurriedly turned the control to the maximum. For a moment, several types of energy madly mixed, and the 6 children screamed in unison. Damien and Raven naturally wouldn't sit back and watch their friends suffer. All kinds of darts, bombs, and shadow arrows flew at the leader. The believers blocked with their flesh and blood. Within a 5-meter radius in front of the leader, a large number of corpses had fallen, and blood flowed on the ground. Damn it. Raven wanted to use the power of blood to force a way out, but she was afraid that she would completely lose control and become a pure demon, so she hesitated for a moment. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Tim flew out from the side passage like a big bird and swept over the believers' heads at high speed. Tim was definitely not happy at this moment. These guys dared to ignore him. They tied him up with a rope and threw him aside, then left him alone. The main reason for the difference in treatment was that he didn't have any superpowers. As the leader of the young Titans, even though he was self-proclaimed, he still suffered 1,000 insults. His uncle could endure, but his aunt could not. Once he was free, he would teach his blood brothers a lesson. Chapter 886. Tim's glider was made of a rare metal in the universe. It was light and sharp, and when it flew past Wonder Girl, it cut off the connection to the equipment with 2 light slashes. Without this thing holding it back, Case's arms broke the metal arm directly. He shook his wrist and took out a long whip. With the power of thunder, he whipped it at Bart Allen, who was at the top of the machine. After Pulse Boy escaped, he rescued Blue Beetle. At the same time, Tim also saved little Jonathan and Animal Boy on the other side. No. The balance in the leader's body was broken. He only had time to shout before he was swallowed by the fire. The violent explosion caused the ground to shake, and the underground base began to tremble violently. A huge amount of soil fell from the sky, revealing the prelude to the imminent destruction. The middle-aged woman screamed and ran away. The fanatical and brainless believers had been killed by Damien Raven. The rest of them only wanted to make a fortune and enjoy themselves. Now that the base was about to collapse, they couldn't care less about the children. All of them scrambled to run out. I am your god. Come back and worship me. The bald leader walked out of the fire. The Kryptonian cells had strengthened his body. The fire on his body gradually extinguished. The parts that flew out from the center of the explosion hit his body, making muffled sounds. His face was charred, and half of his flashy robe was burned. From afar, he looked like a refugee. However, the leader of the Blood Brothers didn't care at all. Several electric lights flashed under his feet. It was the power of Bart Allen's speed. A few believers who were about to run out of the square were killed by him. He stretched his hand to his mouth and licked the blood. His dignified face now looked like a devil. "You little brats, you are lucky to see the birth of a true god." "Ha ha." The leader laughed heartily. He raised his right hand, trying to imitate Blue Beetle's energy cannon. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move it at all. He cursed silently. He didn't know that Blue Beetle's ability was a product of the Zerg's technology. He thought that there was a problem with his high-tech equipment. He couldn't imitate Wonder Girl's ability either. He had no choice but to use Animal Boy's ability. The leader of the Blood Brothers extended his limbs, and his bones grew rapidly. From a height of 1.9 meters, the leader of the Blood Brothers turned into a 2-meter-tall demon covered in green fur. "It's nothing. His strength is declining." Raven was the first to see through the situation. She raised her hand and shot out a shadow arrow. The rest of his companions attacked ferociously. Little Jonathan was so angry that he was like a little lion, and his attacks were especially fierce. On the other hand, the leader was getting dizzy from the power of God's speed. High-speed movements were not easy to control, not to mention that this was a temporary version. His speed was decreasing with every second, so it was even more difficult to control. Bart Allen easily overtook him, but he didn't have any means of attack. All he could do was run behind him and give him a hard kick. The leader fell and rolled on the ground, dizzy. Before he could stand up, he was tied up by Case's lasso. The Animal Boy turned into an elephant and sat on him. Seeing that he was still struggling, little Jonathan went up and punched him again, knocking out the weakling who claimed to be a god. "Let's go. It's going to collapse." Raven pulled Damien, who ran out of the leader's room with a small bag on his back. Together with a few of his companions, they teleported to the ground. They were waiting outside, and when they came out, they knocked out the others and captured more than 300 people. The leader was naturally the middle-aged woman who threw the poisonous smoke and captured them for experiments. Tim gave her a good beating, and the middle-aged woman was crying for her parents. Knowing that there were more than 200 people escaping from the other side, the young Titans split into two groups. Damien and Raven stayed behind to watch over the captives, and Tim led the rest to chase after them. "This guy has become an idiot." Raven checked the leader of the Blood Brothers that she had brought out. Many types of energy of different attributes had converged in his body. This kind of thing was similar to suicide in her opinion. She didn't know how this guy's brain was so big that he came up with such a whimsical idea. Miraculously, he actually succeeded. "Hey, what did you get in the end?" Damien didn't participate in the battle at the last moment. Instead, he brought out a lot of things to collect information about the enemy. Perhaps this was Batman's tradition? A few sharp-eyed people saw it, but other than Raven, no one asked. "Let me see." Damien took out the items one by one from his backpack. "It's fake." Raven threw away a dirty rag. "Is this a shroud?" "Are you kidding me? This is fake too." She threw away a wooden stick. "Is this the Spear of Fate?" "I don't read much, so don't lie to me." "Oh, this seems a little different." The big lowly took a piece of worn-out parchment and looked at it again and again. She wasn't very sure. "What's this?" "This piece of paper contains incomparably heavy sins. I've only seen it on one person." "Who?" "Judas." Raven hesitated and didn't say stranger. Instead, she used an even more ancient title. Damien's face was sticky. But now that there were magic and gods, one more Judas was nothing. He waved his hand, indicating that she could take it if she needed it. Raven was a little conflicted. This piece of paper was filled with power, but she couldn't use it. Or rather, no one could use it. This was equivalent to a special item in a game with a cool name, but its effects were all question marks. It was impossible to return it directly to stranger. The big lowly was not an ordinary person who held grudges. After thinking about it, it was a little dangerous to keep it in her hands. If she knew that she had an item of this level, Ghost Father Three Gong demons might come to Earth in their true form. She might not be able to deal with it in the original spacetime, so she could only find a place to bury it. Now, there was a good place to bury it. She sensed Thea's location, and a portal opened. She threw the parchment into it. After thinking about it, she sent a voiceover and explained the ins and outs of the incident. Missy and Diana had just left Atlantis. They were having a great time communicating with a few RAO priests. A few aliens with superpowers were no match for them at all. They used both the carrot and the stick, and finally agreed to go to the oasis to spread the gospel of RAO. After taking 2 steps out of the sea, the portal opened in front of her. The parchment and a voice fell out at the same time. She first listened to the process of the incident. She had some impression of this blood brother. He was a character in the Young Titan, Judas's contract. Although there were some differences in the participants and the location of the battle was different, it should be this group of people. She really had nothing to say to that idiot who thought he was a god after absorbing a few superpowers. But it was Judas's contract. She looked at the parchment in her hand. She always thought that it was referring to the betrayal of the Young Titan by the Earthen Lady. Now, both the Earthen Lady and Death Knell were on her side and had nothing to do with the Young Titan. She didn't expect that there would be such a thing as a contract in the end. Chapter 887. This thing, like the 30 silver coins, was the evidence of Judas' betrayal of Jesus. The contract was more like a certificate than a contract. The Roman governor had done something interesting. The 30 silver coins he sent to bribe the staff of Judah were from the public fund. In the end, there would be a certificate left for the higher-ups to check, which was the broken piece of paper in Thea's hand. Money was a direct transaction, so this piece of paper was the evidence of the crime. Such a piece of yellow and tattered parchment determined the fate of Jesus on a legal level. It was the record of this crime and witnessed the whole process of the Holy One's life from birth to death. Just like in Journey to the West, the belt and fan of Taishang Lao Jun were magic weapons. In this world, anything related to God was invaluable. Thea put it in her pocket and prepared to study it carefully. This represented the death of Jesus. Diana also heard Raven's explanation. She knew nothing about Jesus. In her opinion, Jesus was younger than her. It had nothing to do with her whether he betrayed her or not. Let's go back and support them. Thea did not want to explain God. It was too much of a shock to Diana's worldview. She nodded immediately and flew away. When the 2 goddesses returned to the Sahara, the Young Titan had already captured all the captives. After a simple handover, they rushed to the next oasis. Sia orders the agents to take these cultists away. The Earth needs labor everywhere in the Dark Night and Raoul, which is an alternative day. These 500 people can't even make a splash if they throw them into the Earth. The problem of human beings was solved. What was left was the problem of land. Relying on the existing environment, it was certainly possible to build a large magic lock. With her ability, she could build it with a little effort, but it was really unnecessary. Not to mention the time and effort, it was troublesome to build but easy to destroy. It was possible that a random bomb would destroy the entire magic structure. Scientific methods were also not suitable. Several deserts were located in the places with the strongest sunlight. Unless the sun was pushed away or the Earth's orbit was changed, the deserts would definitely come back in less than 10 years with the help of heat-resistant plants. In the end, Thea went to Luther. Baldy Luther had developed a solar device with a high conversion rate in prison. It was set up above several large desert areas to artificially block sunlight and reduce the burden on plants and land. At the same time, this part of the energy could be used where it was needed more. The 2 of them quickly negotiated the relevant matters. Luther had always seen himself as the savior of mankind. He was too lazy to save 1 or 2 people, but with so many people, he felt a sense of accomplishment when he saved them. He agreed after a few conditions. Thea also used the Red House Research Laboratory to cultivate several plants with high drought resistance. She called on all the refugees to plant them in the form of a reward for each plant they planted. Damien Dark, Ninja Masters Jr., was also transferred from Nevada to the Sahara. He was not a famous agronomist, and his talent was completely skewed. He would continue to do his job and plant corn. Then I'll go back first. You be careful. Thea seemed to be implying something as she glanced behind her. The global conflict began to escalate rapidly, and all the major countries were under great pressure. Superman was hit by a nuclear bomb in the Bering Strait, and the leaders of various countries were assassinated. She had to go back to protect her mother. Leaving Diana to continue to deal with the various matters here, Thea stepped out and disappeared in the oasis. The surroundings fell into a rare silence. Diana seemed to want to wait for Thea to go further away. After a long time, she said casually behind her, "Come out, we found you long ago." "Is that so? What an amazing achievement. Your lover seems to have walked deeper and farther on the road of darkness than I have." Several layers of ripples appeared in the air, and an extremely beautiful but evil woman walked out. Her face was exquisite, like a work of art. She had light red hair and wore a violet dress. "You're just a pitiful creature with nothing but power. You're not enough to spy on her realm." Diana's words were quite harsh, and she dismissed the other party as useless. She was very confident. For love, she could go against the world. She wanted to sow discord with just a few words. "Dream on." The evil woman snorted unhappily. "Who are you? Judging from your aura, you're also a member of the Greek gods, but I've never seen you before." Diana did not rush to draw her weapon. Instead, she asked calmly and tried to put psychological pressure on the other party. Thea had already indicated that there was someone following them, but Diana was not afraid. She did not have any intention of attacking because the other party had the aura of a Greek god. "I'm Circe, the daughter of Apollo and Persephone." "Phut!" Diana almost laughed out loud. Apollo and Persephone were of the same generation as her, and they were both the children of Zeus. This was normal. However, Persephone had another identity. She was the wife of Hades, the queen of the underworld. Thinking that Hades was being cheated on, she, who had always disliked Hades, was very happy. She realized that she had been spending too much time with Thea, and she was becoming more and more playful. She quickly stopped smiling. But all of this was a great insult to Circe. "Is it funny? You're just a dummy made out of mud." Feeling that her pride had been violated, Circe forgot her original purpose. She was surrounded by a dark aura, and the sun lost its brilliance for a moment. A large mass of darkness rushed out in all directions. As the daughter of the sun god and the queen of the underworld, the two extreme attributes of light and darkness had achieved a perfect combination. Although she was a generation younger, Circe was born more powerful than many Greek gods and demigods, including Diana. Without the restraint of divinity and the twilight of the gods, Circe studied magic diligently. With the attributes of a demigod and the attainment of a great sorcerer, Diana was no match for her in the original timeline. But now, things were different. After seeing Thea's countless dark magic, Circe's skills were only passable in her eyes. A demigod was a joke in front of a new god. She raised her left hand and a barrier separated the two of them. The darkness that seemed to be able to cover the sky instantly disappeared. "Why are you following us?" Diana originally wanted to persuade Circe to give up on dark magic, but she thought that Circe was more advanced than her. She was not qualified to say that. Circe avoided the question and did not answer. She lived in seclusion nearby. When Damien and Raven went on a killing spree below, she was alerted. After that, she was attracted by Thea's dark magic and came out to take a look out of curiosity. However, Diana's indifferent attitude made her more and more annoyed. She hated people for no reason. They were not compatible with each other and would fight whenever they saw each other. This was the saying between her and Diana. Chapter 888. Diana did not know why Circe suddenly hated her. She did not want to start a fight. She felt that there might be a misunderstanding. "Why are you following us?" she asked sincerely again. Circe, of course, could not say that she was just out for a stroll. She was attracted by Thea's deep and pure dark aura. That would be too embarrassing. She was, after all, the daughter of the sun god and Pluto queen. Circe thought quickly and said, I heard that Apollo's divine artifact is on Paradise Island. It should belong to me. There was indeed a divine artifact on Paradise Island, but it had been given to Hera long time ago. Diana could not change it now. She told Circe what she knew and said that if Circe needed it, she could accompany her to Mount Olympus to get it. Circe was just looking for an excuse. She did not intend to ask for any divine artifacts. Apollo's attributes did not conflict with hers, but it was not suitable for her either. Other than using it to shine and save electricity, it had no other use. However, Diana's refusal gave her an excuse. Don't try to trick me. Several streaks of black mist began to take shape. Circe waved her fingers, and a black flame dragon walked out of the mist. It looked very lifelike. The dragon spread its wings, sucked in its stomach, and breathed in. A large mouthful of flames was spat at Diana. If it was in the original time, the Valkyrie could only dodge or block it with her shield. But it was different now. She could see that the magic flames were fake. It was originally a dragon made of magic. How could she make the dragon spit fire? It might be easy to trick an ordinary person, but it was not enough in front of a god. Diana, in particular, had a very deep understanding of reality. She was able to break through fabrications and see through illusions. According to Sia, Diana had a pair of wise eyes and had gotten rid of the huge trap of blessing from the Greek gods. She also had the princess as a reference. She would learn and interact from time to time. The path ahead was very clear. The Valkyrie was improving every day. Diana smiled brightly in the face of the dragon's flames. There was no harm without comparison. She had been with Thea every day, and her opponents were either Darkseid or Black Death. To be honest, Diana was not confident at all. However, after seeing Circe today, she immediately found her balance. Oh! It turns out that I'm very powerful. As if swatting a fly, he raised his left hand and lightly waved it. The flames that seemed to be able to burn a huge hole in the ground were directly dispersed. As if she wanted Circe to see how strong she was, she even raised her hand and gestured to show that there was no burn mark at all. Was it possible for her to try and dissuade a few words when she saw a lively fellow from her hometown? Give up on dark magic. I can see that you are very talented in magic. It won't be difficult for you to change to other magic. This path is not suitable for you. Diana belonged to the category of people who had never eaten pork but had seen pigs run. She was too familiar with magic and could see the depth and height of the magic at a glance. What a joke. You don't want to persuade the people around you, but you want to persuade me. Are you crazy? Dark magic is very fast, but there is a balance in everything. There is a price to pay for using dark magic. You will forever sink into the underworld, unable to reincarnate and free yourself. Isn't that a price worth paying? Ha! Circe was so angry that she laughed and pointed at Diana. Did you dissuade your companions? What did she say? The two little fellows in the underworld seemed to be of the same lineage as her. Did you also lecture them like that? Diana opened her mouth, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Thea was going to be the master of the underworld. In the future, no one would care about her. She would be the one to care about others. They were both dark magic. Thea was the master, so she could use it as she pleased. Circe was a thief, so she would be a slave after she died. As for Damien and Raven, they were on the same side, so she would treat them differently. Diana looked at her with some sympathy, which angered her even more. Circe thought that she didn't know what to say. It was fine if she didn't know what to say, but she even looked as if she cared about a mentally handicapped person. What was the meaning of this? How dare you look down on me? Let me show you the blessing of Goddess Hecate. Circe cancelled the giant dragon, and the characteristics of her magic quickly changed. An awe-inspiring and irresistible power rushed out like a wave. There were countless vengeful spirits, including ancient Greek warriors and modern ordinary people. They wailed and screamed, wanting to kill all the living. Ouch! Diana didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course she knew about Hecate, the goddess of magic in Greek mythology, the irresistible god of death. There was no doubt that her power was very strong. But Diana was more familiar with souls and death. She wanted to ask Circe, "Do you dare to use some skills that I'm not familiar with?" The new god was half a level higher than the old god, just like the father was higher than Zeus. Thea, who was half a step away from the goddess of death, was also higher than Hecate. Considering that Hecate was already dead, and Thea was still alive and kicking, there was an insurmountable gap between their strength. Circe's soul attack was like a child's trick to her. Being able to destroy the death energy of a city was nothing to her after seeing the Black Death Emperor and Thea. Diana was a little bored. This opponent couldn't use her full power. She unsheathed her sword, and the mixed magic was cut in half. Waves, roars, everything turned into nothingness under the light of the sword. "What other tricks do you have?" Diana's eyes were filled with doubts, and the tip of her sword was pointed at Circe. Circe gritted her teeth and cursed. She finally realized that there was a big gap between her and Diana. She kept thinking, looked around, and flew not far away. At first, Diana thought that Circe was retreating, so she didn't take it to heart. There was no enmity between them, so she didn't think much about it. But seeing the direction Circe was running, Diana was furious. Circe was flying towards a group of refugees. "Come back here." She was much faster than Circe. She threw out the lasso of truth, and the golden lasso drew an arc in the air, flashing with dazzling light. It wrapped around Circe's left leg and pulled her back. Circe was also a ruthless person. She opened the 5 fingers of her right hand and threw a colorful magic at the crowd. The men among the refugees were stunned. In the next 3 seconds, the magic began to work. Some turned into rhinoceroses and rushed towards Diana, some turned into antelopes, and some even turned into eagles. The refugee camp was in an uproar. Countless women screamed at the same time. The transformed men were even more panicked. They began to run in all directions. "Calm down, I'll help you," Diana shouted. Unfortunately, the ordinary people below were already scared out of their wits. The beasts trampled on the women, and some of the women had already picked up their guns and were ready to fight back. Damn transfiguration! Diana hurriedly focused on saving people. The warrior god was not suitable for this kind of thing. Fortunately, the Ring of Light gave her some good ideas. Mobilizing her courage, hundreds of female Amazon warriors walked out of the air. They were riding horses, carrying spears and shields. They all took action to control the people in the camp. Chapter 889. By the time Diana managed to calm the chaos in the camp, she realized that the culprit, Circe, had disappeared. The Valkyrie was furious. Circe had taken advantage of her kindness. She bound every refugee with the lasso of truth, and they all returned to their original state. However, Diana did not see any gratitude in their eyes, only fear and resentment. Diana shook her head gently. It was indeed her negligence that allowed Circe's magic to fall on them, causing them to suffer an unexpected disaster. Diana could understand that. However, the alienation between the people and the gods, or rather, between ordinary people and superheroes, still made her uncomfortable. "Why do you have the ability and we don't? Why do we have to suffer because of your battle?" Looking at the resentment hidden in the refugees' fawning, Diana did not know what to say. Maybe she's also protecting herself. Thinking of how her lover usually laughed and scolded her and stepped forward at critical moments, Diana had mixed feelings. Under the confused gazes of the refugees, she rose into the air and flew into the distance. If Thea knew what her wife was saying about her at this moment, she would definitely look up at the sky and sigh. "I don't have a ghost protecting me. Some people can't be treated as humans. For example, these people in front of her. Don't play dumb. I know you can understand English." In order to take care of the emotions of the ordinary people around her, she wore a fur coat and tried to negotiate with the 2 old Russian guards at the gate. She spoke English, they spoke Russian, she spoke Russian, they spoke English. In short, they refused to let her in. There was someone else behind the scenes, and Thea did not want to make things difficult for the 2 soldiers. She had been dawdling at the gate for 10 minutes. She was urgently summoned here less than half an hour after she parted with Diana. The situation in Russia had changed so quickly that even the government was caught off guard. Superman had been captured. He had been hit by a nuclear bomb in the Bering Strait. When the Martian hunters went to look for him, they found that they could not find him. In the end, the world's best detective, Batman, had to personally search for him and find this secret laboratory on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It was not a good idea for superheroes to save people in countries that were hostile to them. If things went awry, World War III would not be a joke. When that time came, Darkseid and the Black Death Emperor would have nothing to do with them anymore. Fortunately, the young mistress still had the status of the first daughter, and her strength was unrivaled in the universe, so she could only ask for the first daughter. When Louise heard that something had happened to Superman, she was so scared that she almost had a heart attack. She was just the deputy chief editor of a newspaper and was nothing in front of the Russians. When she heard that Thea had come to ask for Superman, she also used the excuse that reporters needed to report truthfully and went along with her. "You're obstructing the freedom of the press," Louise cursed. Thea hurriedly pulled her back. "Your freedom of the press doesn't work here." Louise, who had a strong sense of justice, obviously knew that this was a serious matter. She was also the daughter of the Minister of National Defense, which was also sensitive. Both sides were testing each other's bottom line, so she could only hold on to her identity as a reporter. But when she thought of her husband being attacked by a nuclear bomb, her heart ached uncontrollably. Clark was trying to help others. What did he do wrong? These people were simply inhumane. While they were arguing, they saw 4 strong men carrying a laser cutter from the warehouse into the main building. When the main building opened, there was the sound of an electric drill. You. The more Louise thought about it, the angrier she got. She pointed at the 2 guards at the door and muttered with a ferocious expression, as if she wanted to eat them. Thea immediately noticed that something was wrong. Although it was as weak as a spark, a blue light flashed in Louise's eyes. Damn! Psionic power. The young lady was really surprised. Louise's talent was beyond her expectations. Without external help, she could awaken such an unusual ability on her own. Her talent was extraordinary. "Calm down. Don't make things worse," she whispered in Louise's ear. At the same time, she used magic to gradually calm Louise's irritable heart due to the boiling of her genes. "What's wrong with me?" Louise was confused. Her eyes were full of confusion. She felt as if she had lost a few seconds of her memory. Thea asked her to go to the side and rest. "Here, drink this. There's a small problem with your body. You need to rehydrate." She handed Louise a bottle of water. She gave her a look that told her to go back and talk. Thea then turned to look at the 2 soldiers. "Fine. Isn't it just a political trick? I want to see how powerful your laboratory is." Of course, she knew the president. In fact, she was very familiar with him. He could be considered wise. He would never give the order to launch a nuclear bomb, send someone to kidnap someone, and finally cut them up for experiments. The truth was as expected. The president had been dealing with domestic affairs for a few days. He was in a bad mood and went hunting. Before he left, he handed over all the affairs to the prime minister. She knew this prime minister as well. Unfortunately, the prime minister was involved in another case and was under investigation by the Congress. Thea made 7 or 8 phone calls in a row before she figured out the situation. The other party was the opposition to the current president. The specific excuse was of course the same old cliché. Something about a threat to national security. Something about wanting what America had. If they really didn't have it, then they would destroy him. As for the reason why it was inconvenient to put it on the stage, it was nothing more than capturing Superman and causing a conflict between the 2 countries. Then, depending on the scale of the war, they would decide whether to take advantage of the situation or let the current president take the blame. Of course, if they could use this opportunity to research Superman's secret, that would be even better. Thea had no intention of getting involved in this political fight. After thinking for a while, she started to make calls again. Who didn't have a few friends in modern society? The opposition to the military also needed the support of businessmen. They also needed the help of the underground world to deal with things that were inconvenient for them. Thea had people on both sides. Many people were pressuring her. After all, the people who wanted to start a world war were always in the minority. The person in charge of the laboratory finally couldn't withstand the pressure from all sides. Half an hour later, Superman was released. Although he was miserably bombed, the power of the steel body was extraordinary. Electric saws, electric drills, and laser cuts didn't hurt him at all. A lot of metal dust fell off his body. After 10 minutes under the sun, his cells finally returned to their original state. After checking the radiation index, he brought the two back to the main hall. Outside the Hall of Justice, the Daily Planet was not far away. Thea knew that the couple still had things to say, so she prepared to leave. Louise wanted to say something but stopped. She wanted to ask what happened to her, but she didn't know where to start. "You're so lucky. Take this and practice." Thea took out a booklet that looked like a martial arts secret book and handed it to her. She prepared this for Thea. No matter how comprehensive the bodyguard was, it was not as good as her own. Moreover, Thea felt that she was about to break through, so she really didn't have time to run around wildly. Chapter 890. Summing up all the factors, what she prepared for her mother was psionic ability. Kerrigan had a wealth of theory and practical experience. The sharp insectoid mastermind was passed down from generation to generation. In order to make each generation stronger than the last, their secret knowledge was very helpful in developing the brains of intelligent life forms. Thea studied it and modified it to a suitable level for Earthlings. After explaining its use, she activated psionic ability for her mother. Mirror image, projection, and displacement. It didn't require much damage. As long as it could save her in the face of danger, that was enough. She had specially written a document for this purpose. She didn't have such a relationship with Louise, so she naturally gave her a copy. Before she left, she couldn't hold back her curiosity. "Forgive me for being blunt, but this ability is very difficult to activate even with talent. Logically speaking, you shouldn't." Superman's attention also shifted to his wife. At first, he didn't understand what was going on, but after Thea explained it in detail, he realized that his wife loved him to this extent. There were such cases in the records of Krypton where someone awakened psionic ability under extreme emotional agitation, but it was as rare as a panda. "Louise." Superman looked emotional. Thea hurriedly interrupted Superman, who was about to show off his affection. "Can you wait until I leave? Does an accident count? There was an interview where I witnessed an intense gunfight. There was also a landslide, and I was the only one who survived." Louise began to blabber on about her past. The more Thea listened, the more speechless she became. She had experienced all kinds of car accidents, bank robberies, cafe explosions, hostage-taking by fugitives. It was hard to say which one was the most stimulating and activated the psionic ability gene. The most amazing thing was that this big sister was also struck by lightning. When she was in 3rd grade, a bolt of lightning struck her. According to her mother, Louise lit up like a candle. Thea strongly suspected that it was this experience that gave her the psionic ability she had today. "It's not easy for you to live this long." The next time Barry said something about lightning choosing him, Thea could use Louise as an example. "Look, there's another one here who was struck by lightning." On the way home, she couldn't help but wonder if Louise's life as a main character was really that strong. He had just finished writing the teaching materials, and she had activated her spiritual ability right in front of him. What a coincidence. Superman and his wife returned to their apartment in Metropolis together. Superman was very tired. Not only was his body tired, but his heart was even more tired. "Is human greed really so hard to satisfy?" he asked his wife. "If the gods can't do anything, what can I do? Raoul and Thea are smarter than me, but I believe that my Clark is the one who can bring hope to everyone. He is the son of Krypton, the Superman who grew up on Earth, and my husband. He will definitely find a way to solve all the problems." After Louise became the deputy director, her eloquence skills improved. She filled Superman with a big bowl of chicken soup and made him dizzy. He almost forgot his own name. Louise thought that everything would get better. Brother Superman slept at home for the night and was refreshed to do good deeds, but another problem came knocking on his door. Several helicopters stopped him in the air and wanted to take him to assist in the investigation. When he received the news, Thea was chatting with a few bankers. Batman called her out in a hurry. He came to the White House today using Bruce Wayne's alias. He was elegant and looked like a beast in human clothing. "Looking for me at the White House? What's the matter?" "Superman has been taken away again." Batman looked like his master had been taken away again, and he had to go and rescue him. Thea was dumbfounded. "Are you kidding me? I just fished him out yesterday. Who is so disrespectful to the goddess of death? Aren't you afraid of digging coal after you die?" Batman handed her an address. European Territorial Dispute and Reform Affairs Committee. Thea looked at it and took out the computer beside her to check. Such a temporary organization also wants to capture Superman. Their excuse is to summon Superman to explain the problem with the Fortress of Solitude. Thea rubbed her forehead. These people on Earth bullied the weak and feared the strong to the extreme. If they had the ability, go and capture Luthor or the Joker. Go to Arkham and ask them why they didn't abide by the United Nations Convention. They wanted to capture an honest man like Superman and bully him to death. It was true that as long as one was alive, the battle wouldn't stop. After so many torments, Superman still didn't change his mind. The stubbornness of the Kryptonians was evident. Who is behind this? Thea felt that Batman must have investigated. The Chess Association. A name that was neither familiar nor unfamiliar came out of his mouth. Thea sighed. The Chess Club, a super-intelligence agency composed of agents from various countries, had already grown to a certain scale. They shared information with each other and relied on each other's connections. A large number of trained government agents had gathered together. They were not willing to be chess pieces, but they also wanted to be chess players. They only cared about the results and not the process. This was the operating principle of the agents. Relatively speaking, black-skinned Avatar was considered to have a higher moral standard among this group of people. As for the remaining group of people, each had a lower bottom line. The traitor Maxwell Lauder was one of the best among them. Someone saw him being resurrected by the White Lantern, but the Alliance never received any concrete evidence. Thea didn't shirk her responsibility anymore. Not long after a war of words, she rescued Superman again. Superman's face was livid. He had never been so angry even when facing Zod. Thea was afraid that he would tear down the White House. She asked for Batman's opinion and the three of them went to the Batcave to discuss in detail. "This is too much. This is too much." Superman strolled around the house like a donkey. Bruce looked at him expressionlessly. Thea took 2 pieces of cake from the old butler. "I said the Fortress of Solitude is my home." "What did they say?" "They said that they suspected there were weapons of mass destruction inside and wanted to send an international observation team to check it out. Anything that could threaten them would be handed over to them for safekeeping and transfer." What a joke. Who gave them the right? Superman was like an injured lion, roaring loudly. The chess club had crossed his bottom line. The Fortress of Solitude wasn't a weapon. It was just a home where he missed his parents. Now these people wanted to get their hands on it. Even Thea was angry when she heard this. She even felt that these people wanted to provoke Superman and cause chaos so that they could seize power. "Clark, calm down. Don't be controlled by anger." Batman tried to persuade him. "I'm very calm. I want to go back and protect my home. If they dare to come." With that, he walked out of the Batcave and flew towards the North Pole. The two of them were silent for a while. "Bruce, let Superman rest for a while. I'll take this opportunity to rest for a few days too. Don't call me for any recent activities." With that, she also left the Batcave. Earth was important, but her own strength was the most important. She had been stuck at this level for a while. It was time to make some breakthroughs. Chapter 891. Thea now had a big family and business. It was not easy for her to go on a trip like this. The chess club was made up of a group of ordinary agents. Batman volunteered to investigate. Whether it was the law or the superheroes who destroyed their bases, he was responsible for it. Thea did not care. It seemed to be a small group of people's ambition, but it was actually a political problem. To put it bluntly, the agents did not have a promotion. Not all agents could be the president. They had worked hard for more than 10 years. What they did had to be kept secret from their families. Some even had to hide their identities. They did not even have a chance to show off in front of others. Marvel's shield had the same problem, but it was more prominent. Was the idea of Hydra really attractive? What a joke! An organization that had been passed down for thousands of years had long gone astray. The name of this organization could be Hydra, three-headed snake, or five-headed snake. The reason why they rebelled together was that there was no promotion. The agents were looking for a way to change. They studied hard, trained hard, and finally stood out in the selection. They could either become the king of agents with scars all over their bodies, or return to ordinary people with missing arms and legs. After paying such a high price, the people in power still treated them as pawns. They gave them the name chess club to disgust them. No one would do that. Ordinary people could only endure injustice. The agents were different. They had guns and were very capable. Naturally, they wanted to do something big. Thea mentioned this to her mother, but there were not many ways. Moira was already the most powerful president in recent years. It was not convenient for her to repeatedly intervene in the intelligence system. Whether it was the FBI or the Heaven's Eye Society, they were supervised and proved that they were part of the country's operation system. However, the White House's authority was limited to this. To further pressure and investigate the organization's internal affairs, they would need to cooperate with several parties, such as the Congress and the military. After the discussion, they could only let Batman cause trouble in the beginning. After that, they would forcibly disband the chess club and arrest a few of the leaders. The rest of the small fries would be scattered and reorganized. Some of them would be transferred to civilian positions. In the future, they would provide more transfer opportunities for the recruited agents and improve their welfare. Whether it was the research lab or the military, they would have more choices. Political matters were very troublesome. They could only leave it to their mother. They left the White House and returned to Star City. Oliver began to recruit thugs again and was going to ask Thea for some advice. Looking at the guy on the screen who was holding two guns, wearing a football team uniform and a hockey mask, she curled her lips. Wild dog. I don't think highly of this guy. He has the head of a snake and the eyes of a rat. What's the point of keeping him? In her opinion, this kind of person was neither firm nor determined, nor capable. She did not know what was wrong with him. He came out to do justice, but in the end, he would either be shot to death in an alley or betray his boss and walk another path. In short, he was not a good person. Seeing that Thea had such a low opinion of Wild Dog, Oliver, who had a sister complex, immediately changed his mind. Originally, he had planned to investigate this matter, but now, he had no intention of doing so. The brother and sister talked for a while, and Oliver talked about his illegitimate son. William doesn't look like me. Seeing Thea's strange look, he hurriedly explained, I'm not talking about his looks, I'm talking about his personality. Indeed, that child is a little cowardly, but to be fair, he is a smart child. Oliver smiled. Yes, I've always been bad at studying. I hope he can become a scientist in the future. Although he said it casually, Thea could still hear that he was a little unhappy. His son could not inherit his legacy, and their personalities were also very different. Oliver was a little disappointed in this child, but he was also a little excited about the child that was about to be born. After telling them that she would be away for a while, Thea finally went to the Sahara. The two goddesses told her about Circe as a joke. In order to prevent Superman from overreacting, she still stayed on Earth for 3 days. Come back soon. Their foreheads were pressed together, and they smelled each other's breath. The two did not speak for a long time. After kissing Diana goodbye, she began her journey in the universe. A few planets outside the solar system were affected by the black and white. A few major families were severely damaged, and now they were closing their doors and licking their wounds. Originally, they had the tendency to leave Earth and establish themselves as kings, but now they were all well behaved. Without alerting anyone, she took a few glances. The indigenous forces of the original planets were rising, but they could not make a big wave in the face of advanced weapons. The people on Earth may not be a match for them in terms of science and abilities, but they were experts in scheming. She was not worried at all. The development of the Ibn Trade Association was very normal. The gorilla Grud was like a local tyrant here. He ate and slept every day, woke up and played, and slept again when he was tired. His life was beautiful. Thea was not so leisurely. She was seizing the time to make a breakthrough. She repeatedly compared the painting that obtained most of Raoul's power and the contract with Judas. Both of them were very helpful to her, but unfortunately, they were not enough. The two-dimensional world still did not give birth to life. Although there was light and time, it was still two-dimensional. It would not suddenly explode and turn into Earth 53. There was an insurmountable gap between living beings and non-living beings. The other contract with Judas was a little disappointing. It was not the spear of fate that killed Jesus directly. The effect was much worse, and she could not understand this kind of death. It had a strong taste of fate and a little bit of martyrdom. She had no love for it. She could help others, but martyrdom? What a joke! She did not have enough understanding of life. After 3 days of seclusion in the Ibn Trade Association, she finally saw her shortcomings. She had seen too few lives. She had never seen a chance to hover between life and death and fight to the death for a chance of survival. According to traditional habits, this time should be looking for a breakthrough point between life and death. She should challenge those of a higher level and kill those of a higher level. However, this method was not suitable for her. Her level was too high, and there were only a few famous people in the universe who could exchange blows with her. Regardless of whether she won or lost, once the battle started, half of the universe she was currently in would be blown up. It was not a good idea. Killing ordinary lives was not only against the purpose of the White Lantern, but also touched her bottom line. Fortunately, she had a big brain and quickly thought of a way. If she did not kill, she could let others kill her. She did not have the horror of being between life and death. She could watch others struggle. The largest Colosseum in the universe? Grood, who was as happy as a fool, was confused by the young lady's question after a day of crazy fun. No. It shouldn't be. Not everyone in the universe is law-abiding. Thea looked at him as if he could not think of an answer. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,